So midterms are over. I didn't want to make any type of commentary while voting was going on, and have any type of an influence or kind of intrude into anybody's thinking on the election in a cynical way, or whatever is the opposite. And I'm looking to see if people are commenting on if they can hear my voice. Um, so in a cynical way, or in a non-cynical way. So I didn't want to be exuberant about setting expectations for this election, and I certainly didn't want to be cynical. My only question about it was what was going to drive voter turnout. I think I listened to Scott Adams. He made a lot of sense maybe 2 months ago, and he said inflation, although it's not transitory kind of on a long timeline, I suppose. And I don't think it's something that's going to kind of retreat too much. It's transitory enough in people's thinking, and the way time works. Time has become so collapsed that you can't even remember last week. So you might remember some bitterness at seeing the pumps or seeing food prices, but at a certain point it becomes the normal, and then when it goes down, you have it takes away that anxiety, at least for a little bit. And so I didn't think that was going to be a good issue. I think that Lindsey Graham was certainly kind of meddling worse than Russia ever could in the election and influencing the election. I of course I thought that DeSantis was going to win. I don't think he would be a good candidate for president. I'm delighted with him as a governor. I think he would be a lousy candidate for president. And I attribute his having acquired that seat not on his own campaigning efforts, but initially because of the extraordinary efforts of Ali, who kind of pursued the votes, and I think that had a huge outcome. Hopefully he'll just stay as the governor. Why would anybody want that heat? To be honest, and having known so many winning candidates and so many losing candidates, why would anybody bring that on to them in a particularly hostile environment? So hopefully people can hear me now. I see a request to speak, and I'm not good at it yet though, so I'm gonna find where the request to speak is. I'm gonna see who that is, and Clapchop, I see you, and I'm just give me one more minute, and then I want to hear what people have to say. One of the things I want to discuss is something that I've been kind of on maybe an angry bandwagon about for a while, which is kind of Jordan Peterson, Daily Wire, and I think this election kind of proves my point that the Republican turnout was not exceptional. It certainly the voters were not activated, and there's a question as to why they weren't activated, particularly the ones that every election cycle they say that now we're going to get the young people engaged, and historically the percentage of young people voting hasn't changed in 100 years, and I know that to be true. But if somebody wants to fact check me and Snopes me, they're welcome to, and certainly clarify if I'm mistaken enough to be corrected. But there really wasn't a compelling reason for people to vote, and if there was, that Roe decision isn't what influenced people. It was the failure of the GOP to properly explain it, because I turned it into an audio book, that decision, all of it. It's about an hour long, and put it on my website. And I made it effortless to kind of listen to, because they took out the citations and the footnotes. So I thought it was really fantastically worded, very eloquent, as it should be, right? And I thought it was a compelling argument. I thought the Florida don't say gay bill, whatever, was also very, very well grounded in the bill, and I also turned that into an audiobook. But the Republicans did a very, very bad job deliberately of informing the public of what it was. So I took it upon myself just a little bit to do that, because I saw upset women, and including my wife, and I don't want that to be the case, and I didn't want there to be misperceptions, and people need to be informed. And the problem with the Jordan Petersons and and such is you rely on them and Matt Stollers and Michael Tracy's, and there's kind of an intellectual laziness, and being being successful at anything, be it investing or in your home life, takes a lot of effort. So if you're going to be successful in your home life, you've read books on how to be a good parent, um, and you've taken counsel from your friends who you perceive to be good parents. And the same is true of investing. You learn not to listen to Jim Cramer or Paul Krugman, and that takes a lot of effort. But there wasn't a lot of pursuit of what those bills were, and Lindsey Graham certainly did what he did. So I thought it was wrong when people were saying you can feel it in the air, the red wave, was so wrong, and it was very Michael Schellenbergerish. It just was not. It was decoupled from reality, and even saying it, even saying a red wave, what it effectively does is it gives you that same type of cathartic release as actually voting. So it almost, saying the red wave is almost a substitute. And I would rely on, Chuck, who goes, gosh, I forget what his handle is. Is it Paziski? I have difficulty with his name. My apologies. Chuck, if you're here, please do correct me. But, empathy doctor, he's awesome. And, I'm not sure if it entirely displaces the actual vote, but I think it's a good substitute for most people. So for many people, saying a red wave was that same type of emotional cathartic release as voting. So if you said it, you were voting. So why vote? You already voted. You voted in your mind. You said red wave, and that was it. And hopefully you persuaded 10 people, or your perception was you persuaded enough people, and you were emphatic, and maybe they voted. But this is a real problem. It's a real problem. It's kind of the merch as an industry. It's what that business model is. While as I think the Democrats are extremely good at agitating their voters and the only release that they're really giving them is to go out and vote. So they're not giving them any type of a safety valve except go out and vote. And they were very effective, because I thought that Lee Zeldin did have a very good chance in New York. I thought it was, a toss-up, which is good. But then I'm in New York now. I saw the voter, turnout, and now I'm in Astoria, and then I was also in Manhattan, so I was at both places. And I saw, in both instances, I saw all the voter turnout from the people who I thought were the most likely, and particularly young women, and what appeared to be kind of young single women. So I think that psychographic profile of the voter is correct. They did a very good job. So for them, they were angry enough to vote, and the Republicans did not make their people angry enough. So that's it. I'm going to take Claptrap. I hope that other people will request, because I can talk too much, and if I keep on talking, then I'm going to forget to feed my cat. So Claptrap, you're about to go live. I think you're going to have to unmute your phone. Here you go. Hello, Claptrap. You are live.
Hey, everyone. First off, I'd like to say thank you, Adam, for starting this space. I appreciate reading your insights. And, I got to say, I went down a bit of a rabbit hole when I saw you talking about Jordan Peterson. I thought what you had to say was very interesting about him. Just a couple things about the midterms. So first of all, that emotional catharsis you mentioned, I think it's really, really true. And also the way the different parties convince people to vote. So what I've seen on the Republican side is more of go out on election day and vote, versus what I gather on the Democrat side is more like throughout the year collecting votes, much more mail-in voting, and I think it's just two different strategies. That's pretty much it for me. But yeah, the Republican infighting too has been really interesting to see after the elections now with Trump's camp and DeSantis's camp. Yeah, I think people are just really disappointed.
May I ask you about the rabbit hole that you found your way in, and what your kind of what your discoveries were?
Yeah, so as a younger man, someone like Jordan Peterson is attractive because it's sort of a pathway to, like, this is how you improve your life, this is how you sort of pull yourself up, and your analysis of it was just a new take that I hadn't seen yet, which is like, especially that video you linked where he talks about how much money he makes. And when you look at it in the broader scope of like the culture war or whatever, you could say Peterson is a more conservative guy. Just thinking about how like one side is way better at organizing people to vote versus he's more about like, oh, just get a Daily Wire subscription or buy my book or whatever. I never looked at it that way, and it was kind of disheartening. Like, oh, these people are more, I don't know, self-serving than I thought. There is some value to be gained from like just taking in his message and looking at his work. But when you put it that way, I had just never really thought about it.
He's super articulate, and I learned a word, so I'm going to kind of introduce it here. Grandiloquence. And I read a lot. I probably read at least 2 books a week, and I'm a scribed junkie, so I read a lot of academic papers on those things I'm interested in. So I'm very interested in Machiavelli, and I'll tell you why I'm telling you this in a moment. Very interested in Machiavelli, but rather than just reading The Prince, which I've read, several times, or Discourses on Living, which I've read repeatedly, and I'm also interested in certain segments of it. There's kind of the little minutia of it is extraordinarily interesting to me, because 5 years ago when I saw actually 2016, but certainly with COVID, I was very interested in what was happening, and I wanted to be a spectator to it. But I also wanted to understand it because, in my mind, it was a garbled mess, right? So it made a little bit of sense, but if I were trying to convey it to somebody else, it was kind of incoherent, not ideologically sound, and not informed beyond kind of my own, intuition and senses of things and my own experiences of things, which is not adequate. So I read a lot of classics, and I read a lot of kind of details on the classics, and that even includes Slaughterhouse-Five, which I exhaustively read, and then read probably 6 or 7 probably even more scholarly papers in it, because it's also extremely difficult to be able to have a narrative structure that explains this moment in time, okay, even to myself, particularly with kind of this collapse of time. So when I listen to Peterson very frequently. I go to his YouTube and I'll listen to what he says, and the longer clips that I see, and he uses a lot of big words that genuinely don't make sense, and it reminds me so much of a skit that was probably way before your time, which is Living Color, which was a great show, right? And there was a skit that one of the brothers had, and I forget his name, but Damon Wayans, perhaps, and he was a prison lawyer, and he would just speak in this garbled mess that the veneer of it was very lawyerly, because he was kind of hustly. He was fast talking, and people don't listen to the words of things. I've learned this from cold calling for years, and from board meetings and everything else for years. People really don't listen to the words. They listen to how they're projected, the emphasis that's added. They listen to certain intensifiers so that they kind of have these sensory cues of what's important. And not adequately, describing that phenomenon. But nevertheless, so when I listened to Peterson, and he did, if you go back, listen to what he calls his apologia that he did on Twitter, that explaining his Twitter suspension about 2 months ago. And it's insane. I've listened to several of his things, and it's insane. It just makes no sense to somebody who is actually familiar with the concepts that he's talking about and the words that he's using. I mean, I read so much, and the words I never come across the tangle of the kind of ugliness of the kind of this conglomerate of words that he uses. It just makes no sense. That it's baffling. And then he says, if you want to kind of decode and decrypt what I say, then not only does that elevate him, but it means that if you wanted, the decoder ring is really the Daily Wire subscription. But I think his general influence is extremely bad on society, and I think he's done very good for young men, but that was years ago. And people can't excuse his behavior now. And Cernovich was the first person who noticed this, actually, but years ago. But people shouldn't excuse his behavior now, and with and look at him as some type of vestigial type of intellect, because he's not. That person does not exist anymore. I bumped into somebody on the street 3 days ago. Actually, haven't come back to a story recently. I bumped into somebody 3 days ago that I haven't seen in 20 years, and when the last time I saw them, they were a happy-go-lucky, happy, joyous person, and now they're essentially homeless. So, the surface-wise, their appearance was somewhat unchanged, except for the lack of teeth. Beyond that, it was the same person, but their mind cannot be the same thing, and it wasn't the same thing, and they were looking for an opportunity to hit me up for money as well. So I think that he's a negative influence now, and that in order for I think younger people have to rely on the classics because it's too easy for them to be hustled. They're just too vulnerable, and they're too much in looking, for that father figure, and that parent figure. And I did not have parents who were good with me. Neither my mother nor my father. They were great people, but they just weren't good for me in many, many ways. But I adopted parents. So I actually found Reese Schoenfeld, who co-founded CNN. I love him so much. He passed 3 years ago in August. His birthday actually just passed 3 weeks ago. And his wife, who's still with us, her birthday's in 2 weeks. And I adopted Reese as a parent that I didn't have. I found other people. I would include Andy Grove, who did something with Intel, obviously. And although my interaction with him wasn't as great, I found people that I could adopt who actually knew me and who loved me, and could help me kind of improve myself and improve my thinking. My natural inclination is to be a little bit paranoid. So they were always able to observe my behavior and correct it or help me self-correct, because it's very difficult for somebody to observe their own behavior in real time and correct it, and your wife or your girlfriend or your parents are never going to tell you because they love you, while as a mentor will say, hit the road, right? That's the good thing about them, is you're constantly trying to impress them, and you've got to be on your best behavior, and the exchange is that you're going to be on your best behavior, and they're going to kind of brain dump on you, and in exchange, you're going to be kind of that good son that maybe they didn't have. So I can understand people hoping the best for Peterson, but it's a scam. And I think this election cycle, where Ben Shapiro is talking about kind of quality candidates, is ridiculous. It is so destructive to people's kind of moral well-being, because it now behaviorally conditions them, just as wearing a mask does, where you see people still wearing a mask in New York, and particularly younger women for some reason, and the men trying to be good companions to younger women. So it behaviorally conditions people to just as the mask did behaviorally conditions them to this is the normal, it conditions them to forget about all the fraud, all the misfeasance of this election, and the voting irregularities, and even what's going on in Arizona, and to say, well, they need to find better candidates, and it just so happens that the better candidates look and sound a lot like Democrats with an edge. So that's my take on them. So one of the mentors I would say kind of that I adopted, and I've discussed this before, was Seneca, because I was this lost kid, and I found Seneca a little bit later in life actually, but at a good time in my life, and I found kind of that advice that Peterson is incapable of giving because Peterson is a commercial product. And so Peterson always has to be activating you to buy something. You may not recognize that signal, but there's always, when I watch it, there's always a call to action, even if that action is to think that this thing in Ukraine is okay. And I'm not talking about Ukrainians, I'm talking about the situation. Obviously, hopefully we all have compassion for the Ukrainians. I'm talking, he interviewed Fred Kagan. The Kagans have been horrible people for 30 years. 30 years. So he's activating you to embrace this Ukrainian thing, and he's giving it some type of an authoritative seal, a good housekeeping seal, and that's very destructive because he did not have Kagan on in any type of interlocutory type of Socratic way. Nothing combative, nothing that would lead to any type of a real resolution of the disparities between those who are against the war and those who are for it. And in fact, about 2 weeks later, he did this absolutely insane video where he looks like a well-dressed madman who his behavior, his character, his being was very, very agitated, his face distorted, and he was pounding the table and calling Putin Hitler. And, this is not the way intelligent people that are actually truly thoughtful of their words and are aware of kind of the audience as a jury talk. And I read extensively on Thucydides and kind of the resolution of the Civil War period. I'm very interested in kind of the court cases and Lysias and all the court cases from back then and how they were presented and the rhetoric and the Philippics and everything else. And to a person who's unfamiliar with rhetoric, it looks like he's super intelligent. But then when you read the Philippics and you read Lysias and you read some of the court cases and how kind of the of 2,000 years ago and kind of all the antagonism that existed and how they presented their cases, and you have to understand kind of the legalistics back then because they were much different. You see that the guy is an idiot. And with Ben Shapiro, I'm an expert on certain elements of trade. Truly an expert, truly a specialist on certain elements, and particularly with China trade. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, and I've written a lot about it. And he was just lying to everybody. Just lying to everybody, repeating the same type of mantra that the Democrats were of, citing a trade fiasco of 100 years ago and what happened when the entire world economic order was entirely different, and somehow he stuffed it into, well, now it's relevant and it would happen again. I really just recommend younger people don't make the same mistakes as me, which is discover all the classics kind of later in life, where I just feel that there's not enough time now and I'm 56, to soak up everything I want to. I feel like there's just not enough time for me not only to soak it up, but then for me to kind of turn that into some type of intellectual currency, not of the financial type, but something that I'm satisfied with, that gives me some type of a spiritual improvement. I talked a lot, right? And my cats are still waiting for food. Does that make any sense to you?
No, absolutely. No, absolutely. There were a couple great points I think you made. I am fascinated with the Stoics.
I love this stuff.
Especially Marcus Aurelius. Yeah, but Seneca as well, for sure.
Did you remember that Cernovich named his son after Marcus Aurelius?
No, I was not aware of that.
Isn't that awesome? He named his second daughter after a Persian poet who I had never really heard of before. And then right after meeting Cernovich for one of his premieres on my walk home, his premiere was in Manhattan, so I had about a 15-minute walk home. I studied it. I studied and I learned. I love the Stoics. I think they're very helpful because I think it's helpful for people to appreciate that death comes quickly, right? So
absolutely,
there are things that have to be accomplished, and if they're not, and I think Peterson does do a good job of that. I think he does emphasize a high productive life. I truly do. This is an extraordinarily accomplished person. It's inspirational how much he does.
Yeah, here's the thing with Peterson for me, or any more controversial figure. I always go with, if I find something I like, okay, I'm going to take that with me, and now that's helpful to me. I don't have to take all that other baggage with me.
That's good.
For better or for worse, he's now a media personality.
I'm gonna for 1 second just because there are other people there, but I want to commend you on something. I want to tell you that is a leading indicator that you have good mental health, that you have a good mental hygiene, and you're able to kind of create this kind of emotional barrier that allows you to kind of immediately filter out nonsense. And that's good. A lot of people don't have that emotional resilience, or they're at a time in your life where they just don't possess it, because that also comes with maturity. And a lot of people don't have that emotional resilience. And for those people, they're particularly vulnerable to them. I'm going to take... I'm sorry, you were saying something?
No, it's okay. I appreciate it.
I'm going to take...
It's your space. Go ahead.
And thank you so much for allowing me to talk, too, right? Because I talk a lot. I'm going to take Rick. I see the good whooper, who I think went blue check here. And then I see Nathaniel Rogers. So I'm going to take them both. So thank you so much, for joining. Do I follow you on Twitter, by the way?
I don't believe so.
Okay, so hold on. Here's Rick. Rick, you're up. Rick, you are now up, so you have to unmute your phone.
Hey, Adam. Yeah, thanks for having this space, and especially thank you for the kind words earlier with regards to Ollie and Stop the Steal. Really do wish more people knew about what happened in 2018 and how close things came with that recount, especially the election system changes that STS implemented in Florida. How that drove a lot of what we saw in Florida in comparison to states like Pennsylvania and Michigan. But what I wanted to ask you about was what you've that whole thing you've talked about, what you branded as the dark city effect, where people aren't allowed to basically return to emotional baseline. And do you see any of these upcoming changes in Twitter that will going to affect that dark city phenomenon? And if so, will any of those changes have an impact on the upcoming elections?
Those are interesting questions, and I really can't be responsive to it in a helpful way because I don't know. I mean, I'm in awe of Musk. Musk and Tom Cruise, I always talk about, and I remember discussing this with Jim Shaughnessy on one of his casts, either before or during. He asked me, what's my thing with Tom Cruise? And I've always said, because Tom Cruise is America. And it's interesting because I also use Tom Cruise, who's led such an exceptional life, and Elon Musk, because you can also kind of use them as a gauge for people's own kind of reasoning of their own identity. And a lot of people don't like Elon Musk, have never liked Elon Musk, and will say he's a fraud or this or that. I think that has a lot to do with their own kind of feeling of inadequacy and identity, because there's a thrill that I get for watching exceptional people do exceptional things. I use that. I use Tom Cruise and Musk also to be able to have some type of an evaluation of somebody else's identity. It tells me a lot when people say that they hate Musk or Cruz isn't, America's greatest actor or finest diplomat, when I believe that he is. Hopefully, Top Gun proved that. But and how people will say Denzel Washington, who is incredible. My wife might have even said Denzel or some other, B actor. But they've only seen 3 or 4 of his movies. They're just afraid to acknowledge greatness. And they're afraid to acknowledge the beauty of people who can do incredible things. So I'm watching Musk. I listen to his spaces, 650,000 people live. It's now like almost 2 million listeners, I think, around there. And he spoke as he usually does on his Tesla earnings calls, which is also the way Zuckerberg used to talk, which is very receptive to people. So I think that he's going to be very successful with Twitter. Because when I look at my experience on Periscope, I see that it was kind of frictionless, and one of the reasons it was successful, I think, and it got a lot of viewers, I get 80,000 live or whatever, and they were also so much fun, is because they existed on people's feed. So if you could have Substack exist on people's feed where it's frictionless to leave Twitter and go to, right now there's so much friction to leave Twitter and go to Substack. You're in a different environment, it looks different, it feels different. If you could stay within the Twitter environment and watch Periscope, and the same reasons all of us here go to YouTube, right? For the most part, is not going to watch Tim Pool or some other silliness. Not that they're silly people, but that type of entertainment. But a lot of us watch the academic lectures on it, right? That's what YouTube is the best at. It's still kind of unadulterated, and there's a kind of a purity and a pristineness to it that woke hasn't yet attacked from great academic lectures. So I think that he's going to be able to really create this X type of thing that he describes, which is this one, where if people want to have the visual or whatever, however they acquire the medium, it will all be directed within that environment. So I think and then at the same time, he's obviously going to be Bitcoin mining or whatever mining he's going to be doing, clearly, with his own kind of currency. And that also leads us to where we're going in the world, and you can see that from Bitcoin now, is that the world is going into rich people's money and poor people's money, and poor people's money will be, Facebook money, and hopefully people's banks and mortgages can be paid or rent can be paid using Facebook money if the landlord or the bank accepts it. So, I can't really think about its influence on the elections because clearly it can have a considerable influence, but I don't know whether that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing. I think people were too emotionally invested in this election as they were in 2020, and if we just take a look at Boeing, which I sold higher, and I sold in January because I had to, and now I see it just had a 50-point run. The economy is roaring. People actually believe that America is falling apart, and yet the dollar is skyrocketing. And we're seeing so much distortion going on in Europe that we're kind of transferring that to the way we perceive our own world, which is actually pretty good. And even with this kind of economic downturn that we appear to be facing, unemployment is still not bad. We're still highly productive. So, I don't know. I think that the greatest influence is really just people's kind of lack of inquisitiveness, kind of this lack of, intellectual curiosity and this lack of effort. And I think that conservatives are particularly good at dividing up the vote within themselves by creating fractions within the vote and kind of these internecine squabbles, which is what we saw with Ali. Where they don't want somebody else to be the leader of the census, which is a new word I just acquired, so I'm practicing it. They don't want somebody else to be the leader of the revolution, and they resent anything that is, just as they resent Musk or whatever. They resented the truck drivers, and I think Shapiro, Peterson, and the whole industry of conservatives told them to go home, that they won the battle. Knowing from history that once they lost that convening force they would be vulnerable individually to all the brute force of the state, which is what happened and continues to happen. And we see the trials going on right now. So I think that it's really important for people to tune out these things. And on Twitter, I still see people sharing Ben Shapiro and all these other, even Matt Stoller, all these people, Mike Schellenberger, just all these people that are actually creating little fractions of the, and they're dividing up the vote. And one of the things I've tried to emphasize is that they really never cite their sources. I see a little, and I subscribe to Matt Stoller because I always support the startup, so it is what it is, and I bought his book. Nevertheless, there's really not a lot of academic effort there. It's all back of the envelope type of stuff. And when I have been extremely familiar with certain things, such as FTC versus Qualcomm, he knows nothing about what he's talking about. I don't care about somebody's kind of intuitive sense of being a cynic. I care about the reality of things. You have to demand that people cite their sources and what informs their view. Otherwise, they're just talking shit. And I always share with people, or I share with people very frequently the books I'm reading. I can't do it all the time because I read so much that it would almost be spam across the timeline, which I spam anyway, so who cares, right? But nevertheless, I read so much, but I do try and share them, and these are the things that informs my view. So I wandered so much from your question, and perhaps the answer to it is I don't know. Right? I don't know. I genuinely don't know if it will have any influence, but I'm a fan of Elon Musk, and so I wish I could go blue without having the blue check mark, honestly. But that's just me. There's some other. Was I at all responsive to your question?
I really enjoyed hearing you talk, and everything that you said was interesting. But I mean, to be fair, you didn't know the answer, and it was a question about a prediction of the future. So not knowing the answer is, I don't either. That's why I was asking. But I appreciate it nonetheless.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I see other requests, and I'm trying to take them, but I just don't. Honestly, I see them at the bottom, and I just don't know how to take them all. I see Avatons is here, so.
I can throw out a quick one.
Please do.
So back before the election, I think it was in August, you had a good tweet that really stuck with me about Oz self-sabotaging with that ridiculous salsa commercial. Obviously, you're really good at seeing those kind of things. For those of us that are less skilled or haven't been trained in that, what are some of the tells or other things we should look for to notice?
Okay. So I've been on the finance committee of a lot of politicians, all Democrats. New York's a Democratic town, and I liked Bill de Blasio. I still do as a person. It's very difficult to evaluate anybody who's in politics in real time because there's obviously so much turmoil and tumult and factions within, and there's just so much going on. So I'm going to leave for posterity people's kind of their own kind of assessment of his mayoralty. But I was on his first finance committee. I knew him even long before that when he was a council person. He was a great council person. But I will say, going back to that, what happened with Fetterman, right? Is Fetterman internally? I don't know who was doing this polling. I'm going to guess it was John Sylvan over at the Global Strategy Group, or one of the expensive and good polling shops. And they're great, right? They're very aligned with messaging, and they probably saw their internal polls. Forget about the shit that is shared publicly, but their own internal polls probably showed Fetterman. I'm going to guess. I'm just going to make up a number, kind of at a ceiling of about 30% of the vote. If I was just to make up a number, I would say about 30% of the total vote. His vote share was very, very bad. Some reasons for that were probably not his own candidacy, but also the name recognition. And Oz was probably, beating him just in terms of, for the most part, it was an uninformed vote that's happening in Pennsylvania. It's not a reflection of the voter. It's just kind of the circumstances and the way people have become so disenfranchised with voting that there's kind of a a desperation, and they just make a vote kind of quickly without any type of a real, fair comprehension of all the issues, right? So Fetterman was probably capping out at about 30%, just making up a number of a ceiling. Oz was probably, going to be a home run, and they needed to find a way to lose. And so they needed a narrative. So I'm going to go back to de Blasio. So in the first few months when he was running for his first term as mayor, he was polling around 3%. He was running against Christine Quinn, who's also a friend, and she's a good person. So forget about the personas of these people. I'm talking about the actuals. And he was polling about 3%. Christine Quinn was polling around 35%. Bill Thompson was polling at about 20%. Anthony Weiner came in kind of late, was polling at about 15%, even despite his own kind of tribulations, very public ones, in fact. And how he won was Bill Thompson. People were kind of dissatisfied with because they didn't feel at the end of the day that they felt that he had just kind of aged out as a candidate. Christine Quinn, there was a lot of resentment because of certain things that she enacted, but that still didn't solve how Bill de Blasio could improve himself in the polls, right? Because he could still kind of lose by not winning, right? So his narrative that he created was based upon his son Dante, who I knew from when he was an adorable little boy. His son is black, and the narrative there was Bill's own compassion to kind of the black experience and stop and frisk in New York. And that gave him a narrative, and he was able to kind of uniquely own that narrative, even though Bill Thompson himself was a black candidate, and very qualified black candidate, and a good guy. So what Fetterman needed something to run against, and Oz's campaign deliberately manufactured something for Fetterman to run against, because everybody knew the accomplishments. Everybody in America loves success, right? That's who we are as a people, if there is such a thing as a people. They love success, and they wanted some part of that magic for themselves, even just to be a spectator to success. So even if people don't like Oz, they appreciate success, right? We all do. And he's a very good-looking guy, very fit, very interested in people's well-being, emotional and physical. So the Oz campaign needed to hand deliver a narrative for Fetterman to run against. And if I was just to make up a date on that, it was sometime in late August, coincidentally, right before, about a month before vote by mail was going to begin and early voting was going to begin in Pennsylvania. Because
it was the 16th of August.
Yeah, I mean, no coincidence. He needed to give them about a month to be able to really, build up upon that narrative of this kind of out of touch, celebrity, right? And he's not a celebrity, but not as much of a celebrity as he is something else, perhaps, but nevertheless a celebrity doctor. And they needed to build up that narrative in the Fetterman camp and to condition it into people's minds, and they did. So there was a legitimate, beyond the captured vote in Philadelphia, which speaks for itself, the plebs urbana. They were able to sway enough people that even if there was corruption in the election, people could kind of morally excuse it within themselves. And that's an important thing also, to be able to have permission to excuse yourself from any type of moral, a deviation from your own kind of moral codes. And he also, delivered that. He gave people permission to be a co-conspirator, kind of a Catalanian, participant. I can't say that there was a lot of tells I mean, it was just glaringly obvious what was going on. I don't think there was, a tell. I think it was just very out in the open because a tell is, a discrete action. I would think of it, a tell is kind of like a poker type of embellishment, of a person's features or speech. It was a very explicit. They were clearly giving a narrative for Fetterman to run on because Fetterman was not doing well.
And I used tell there. I didn't mean it in the a particular physical action that gives it. I meant I was getting at exactly what you just answered, which was the thought process of how to recognize that that's what's going on, and particularly what you're referring to there about the narrative building. And then I hadn't even thought of the what you were referring to about giving people a moral justification for like ignoring what happened in Philadelphia. So yeah, thank you very much. That was perfect.
Thank you so much. I was glad my long-windedness was helpful to that because I can talk. So I want to be responsive to anybody else, and I see Avatan's here, and I see some. I see Frank has gone blue check as well. So perhaps I help persuade him. I think blue checks are good, and I think that one of the interesting things about Twitter Blue now that I don't think people fully appreciate is there's a conversation that Assange, people should go back. There was a conversation that I think exists on Reddit now, so people don't have to spend the money, between Eric Schmidt, who went to visit Assange, with, Gerald, I forget who his number 2 person is in terms of his political operations over at Google. But Assange talked about kind of this conversion of people to hashtags and how information can be better managed as hashtags. And I think one of the really interesting things that Twitter has a potential for being is that kind of a person's hashtag. It's definitely morphing or has the opportunity to morph into something extremely significant. And I think, the best way I can characterize that is just to observe the anger that the left is exhibiting, because they clearly recognize that their own personal hashtag is losing some part of its luster. Their perception is that there's only a limited quantity of this type of luster, and anything that you gain, they lose. And I think Elon Musk, and hopefully everyone listened to that call, and I compliment, I believe his person's name is Yaol, who I know is very anti-Trump and very anti-GOP, but he's done a really good job of preserving not only preserving the confidence, but also saying that we're even going well above and beyond to make Twitter a more secure place. Because if it is going to be a person's hashtag, then we all are at risk if somebody goes on Twitter and says this. I remember as soon as Twitter became freed up and Elon took it over, people were saying horrible expletives, kind of testing the waters, and there was a selfishness to it, as though that was their way of demonstrating free speech, was to be offensive, and it's not. So there are obvious boundaries, and it does hijacking the brand, as Milo once did. I'm not sure if I really want to see those people come back, because I think they did hijack the brand. And one of the things that we're also learning from this experience, as I've discussed with Ron Coleman twice on Periscope and offline, is that a lot of what we're seeing are people who just don't know how to behave in public. They've never had a boss. Most people here have had a boss or have been in the military, have worked in a hierarchical type of an environment where you can be fired, but not only can you be fired, but you have to be very thoughtful to your co-workers. You have to ask them how their day was. You have to be slow and patient with them and always have a smile, because if you don't, they can make your life hell. So you have to be friendly to them. The other thing, everybody here who's kind of worked their way through a corporation knows you always have to thank your boss for hiring you and for keeping you on the payroll. And I think these people who are offensive on Twitter don't understand the rules that all of us have learned the hard way, because the boss called us in, Or they said, this person complained about you. And then you're like, well, I didn't do anything wrong. And you're like, it's not what you did, it's how it was perceived. We all learned that lesson, hopefully. And, those people returning to Twitter do present risk. And I would even include Trump within that, because he's always been kind of this self-employed mega guy. I've always been appreciative of Trump, so it's not an anti-Trump type of statement. I'm certainly, obviously, not an ever-Trumper by any means. But he was even undisciplined and reckless and inflammatory. And I think, Yao, I believe his name is Yao, did do a good job of saying, we can't catch those people while they're saying these things, but we can recognize that it needs to be de-amplified and de-boosted. Now, how much that algorithm is biased to not allow them to kind of be remediated into the Twitter good graces is an unknown. And that's, will Musk open up the algorithms? I don't know, because it's definitely become less of a psyop noticeably than it was 2 weeks ago. It's definitely 100% become less of a psyop. And I visited Mastodon to see Kathy Griffin, and she actually has a funny thing on a picture. Nevertheless, and to see that she's kind of rejoined Twitter and through a nom de plume, as much as she wants to be witty. She wants to be conniving, which is the worst of them. But she clearly now gets kind of the picture, because obviously her agents and everybody spoke to her and said, you can't do this. So I think that Musk is making that kind of correction to people's behavior. It's just now, which way does it go? And how much will Twitter operate in only its own best interest? And John Robb has written about this years and years and years ago. Is all that big data, which is now going to become that much bigger, going to make things worse? I don't know. It's an interesting thing, and I think about that. I'm just fascinated by Musk, and single-handedly, what he's doing, even making people go back to work in San Francisco, is incredible, because he's trying to revive the economy, and then hopefully he can get tax incentives and tax breaks for doing that, as he should, obviously, because if he brings back the workers, it also brings back the peripheral businesses. But only Elon Musk could do that. It takes a lot of personal integrity and kind of a moral fiber. And he's already swaying people's opinion, because I think all of us have noticed over the last few days, even the left is correcting themselves. Even today, with the Twitter woman making, the former ex-counsel of them making her comments, and the left trying to use that, kind of weaponize that, even they checked themselves, and they were like, hold on, before we come into complete agreement with her, which is what we would have done 2 months ago, let's actually delve a little bit deeper. And as it turns out, she was obviously trying to she was trying to conceal her own misfeasance and diminish her own culpability for what went wrong with coding and the legalistics. I talk a lot. I'd love to hear other people, and I'm not good at taking the things, and I see people are there. I can't find a button to press it, because I have to look at a very big screen. So are there any other comments? I'm very interested in other people's perceptions, because I also could be wrong, and I accept that.
Well, if you wouldn't mind going back to the elections, just in general, something I've noticed is over the past few years, especially with Trump, people have been drawn to vibes. Like, oh, I like this guy's energy. And with social media, politics have become much more accessible, like, for the everyday person. But now, what I'm seeing is, especially on the right, people are more attracted to, like, this is our plan, and this is how we're going to get there. And these Trump candidates that didn't do so well, I think they were lacking that. It's not as organized as on the left. That's sort of my perception.
Is her name Boehner? Boehner? Has she won or lost? Is there anything official with her election?
I'm not sure yet. I can check.
Yeah, and
it hasn't been officially called. From the people that I know, I'm suspecting that Carrie Lake will pull it out.
Carrie Lake, but how about is her name? I don't really know. I genuinely don't know this stuff. What these people's names are, because I really don't pay too much attention to it. But is her name Boehner? And it was kind of like a big upset that she lost, or that she was losing. Is it Colorado? Is it Arizona? Does that name ring a bell?
Yeah, it's in Colorado.
And is that race official at all yet?
I don't believe it's been officially called. The last time I looked at it, she was up by a very small margin, like 50.2 to 49.8.
I don't like most conservatives, to be honest with you. Look, America's a liberal country. We're a liberal country. The question is, how liberal are we? We don't want to be European or Australian liberal because they're crackpots, and everybody in Germany denounces everybody else as a Nazi. And you don't have to be white to be a Nazi in Germany. But the country is it's a national pastime for them to denounce each other as Nazis over there. But we're a liberal country. I particularly don't like the conservatives. I don't like people who talk about religion too much. Hopefully we all have faith. But the second you talk about it, it makes you like a guru, right? A guru-G. And I think the conservatives monumentalize religion in a way, the same way that the left kind of monumentalizes science. And so I worry about that feature of them, and because it becomes kind of an intolerance. I saw that with Ali, actually, the criticisms of Ali. If you notice, they were coming after him for his Muslim-sounding name. Is that right? I don't recall what it was. What his birth name, I suppose it is, but his other name, other than than Ali Alexander, and they were coming after his Muslim name. So all of a sudden, they wanted to be anti-Muslim. I mean, the whole thing was ridiculous. So I'm not that sympathetic to them, even though I'm in agreement with so much of them. But I see that a lot of them are just in the industry of being, kind of the industry of being the opposition. And I don't see why people are distancing themselves from Trump. I genuinely don't. And every time I see people distancing themselves from Trump, some people have reasons to do it because they have unique vulnerabilities to the left and to attacks and Wikipedia, and there's industrial career type of thing. So I certainly understand that some people need to create some distance, at least some appearance of distance. But I don't understand why anybody on conservatives would criticize Trump, because in America in fact in reality there's only either a blue shirt or a green shirt, and so there's nothing in the middle. It's not designed for that. So it's either the Trump words, it's the left, and anything that's not Trump is going to be the left. I mean, that's become very, very clear. And so they say DeSantis was a horrible candidate. And the second he's never been encountered in an elevator before. The second he's lucky to just be a CEO in Florida. The second he's in a DC elevator, being assaulted by 50 green-haired women, he's going to buckle because they're going to threaten his daughter and they're going to threaten his physical well-being. So I don't like the conservatives who distance themselves from Trump. I think it's not that it's disloyal. It's something deeper than that. It's they're better off kind of being they're kind of Matt Stoller. There's a reason that they all kind of retweet Matt Stoller and Michael Schellenberger. They even though both of them were kind of COVID tyrants, they're very forgiving of that. And I'm not. And I still resent that in March of 2020, that they embrace the encroachment of our rights, because you never get rights back. I mean, everybody knows that just from their own kind of sales negotiations, right? In life and with their family, you never give something back. And as a kid, you always ask for a higher allowance, and the parents' responsibility is to say no. So I don't like the conservatives, because they try and distinguish themselves as being of a high caliber and a high moral caliber by bashing Trump. I'm interested in winning. I want to win. You can't win like that. DeSantis is incapable of winning. You can't win. But they want to present themselves as some type of cut from a better cloth and one with integrity because of God, and they have this moral type of thing. Who gives a shit about that? If you're going to complain about your daughter's of the educational predation, if that is a word, on girls, which certainly is, then you need to win. So when they're attacking Trump, DeSantis is just going to buckle. They all buckle. When they're attacking Trump and saying when Trump was in office, none of these people have ever run a company. They've never run a company. They have no idea what it's like, and the pressures and the fact that Trump was only as good as the information that he was given, and whatever information he was given. And they didn't give him a lot of good candidates to select from for Attorney General or for his chief of staff. It was really dictated to him that these are the only people we're going to approve. And Pelosi's been in office for 100 years, and she'll be in office for 100 years more. And Alexandra, her daughter, who's very, very sweet, will probably take over for her. These are the hereditary elites, and they looked at Trump as being transitory, and they just needed to trick him out, and they did. And I'm very angry with the conservatives who enjoin themselves with the Stolerish, because Stoller, these people just want to be cynics. They just want to be cynical. They just always want to bash. I want to win. And that means you have to stick with your candidate, good or bad, and you have to, just as they did with Fetterman, the guy doesn't appear like he's going to get better, because he was never better to begin with. And the Democrats said, we don't give a shit, because he's just a puppet. We just want to make sure that he implements the policies we want to implement. And, Trump tried his best, and people didn't give him support then. They weren't supporting, those same conservatives were not supporting for years, even when he was president, because they wanted to make themselves of a higher moral integrity because they're closer to God. And, I want to win. Is that helpful in my explanation of my resentment towards the conservatives? I liked Allie. I genuinely liked Allie. And I don't think, having seen the formation of Move On and being there actually in its first day, literally in its first day, and giving money to it, the Republicans, the conservatives have no desire to build a grassroots movement, because Stop the Steal was almost pre-manufactured. It was like a house that was easily assembled, because Ali was able to take all this online energy and convert it into have all that online energy cross the transom to something real. And he did that with other people as well. And the Republicans completely abandoned him. Just as the conservatives lied when they said, we're not complaining about the January 6th people, because if we appear sympathetic to them, then we won't win. And if we don't win, then we can't help the January 6th people. So none of these conservatives demanded from their candidates that they speak about January 6th. None of them. So why would I like the conservatives, the candidates, when they're not doing anything? Politics is the art of deception, and one of the things you learn from all the studying of these classics, and military history particularly as well, but conquest and the philosophy of political science, is the importance of winning by deception. And you would rather win by deception. There's less risk. Um, there's much less risk to win by deception and have somebody just open a door for you. And the Democrats are pleased to do it, and the conservatives are pleased to open a door and gather whatever type of social currency they can. And the reason that they're kind of forgiving of Mike Schellenberger and Balaji and all these other people, the reason is because they feel that they can forgive him for that because he was right about these other things. Well, Mao was also right about a lot of stuff. I mean, if you take a look at his book of aphorisms, there's a lot of wealth there. Truly, there's a lot of wealth. The guy was not stupid, nor was Stalin. If you take a look at Stalin's notes, very smart. And even if you take a look at the circumstances that surrounded Hitler or anybody else, these were not stupid people. They did horrible things. And had Schellenberger had that opportunity, he would have done a horrible thing. And had Stoller had that opportunity, he would have done horrible things. He said, do what Germany's doing. Germany's a shit country. They don't exist anymore. They're a vassal. They do not exist anymore. And NATO has made it explicit. EU has been very forthright in saying we are not a democracy anymore. We are not allowing smaller member countries to participate in the vote, and we're going to overwhelm them with our own votes. We're going to give ourselves tremendously more weight. I don't think they even allowed Finland or Sweden to have a referendum on joining NATO. And the amount of social displacement that will cause is unbelievable, because these things are extraordinarily expensive, and they can't afford the financial commitments. I talk a lot. And I see it, and I'm so appreciative that people are willing to listen. And I see there's a request here, so I'm gonna take these because now I found out how to do it. I see the other button. So I see you on it. So I'm gonna take it. I'm so delighted to hear your voice. And can you hear me? I just and I'm not good at pronouncing that double O. So Luana, I'm trying to press that button. I'm trying to press the button. Let me try it again. Are you there, Luana?
Hey.
Can you state your name, please? Because I'm not
it's all good. It's pronounced Wana, like the two O's are like a W.
Very nice.
What's up?
Thank you for that. How are you? How's Florida?
I'm well. I'm in Florida. And Adam and I are both New Yorkers. And I'm really glad to see you doing this. But I want to share some. So because I'm in Florida too, which is funny. So there's part of me that says I don't want DeSantis to run for president because I don't want to lose him as my governor, because I know what it's like to have a really awful series of governors. And I agree with you wholeheartedly that those who have not stood for well, first of all, for me, it's really an issue of like tyranny versus freedom. That's really, I've never been a one issue voter, and now I've become one. Now,
do you ever share your story? Is it a horrible thing that I ask you to share?
Oh, what happened to me in New York?
Yeah, because it's very interesting for those who are unfamiliar.
I will, because I think it's unfortunate. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, please do. I interrupted.
Thank you for asking, Adam.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate it. Actually, one of the few people who've ever asked me to, and that's one of the things I find most striking about these last 2 years, because, and I'm sorry, there's a bit of an echo on my end, and I don't know why. I think there's a space bug.
I just muted
maybe
myself.
That's what it was. Oh, okay, thanks. I don't mind the echo. I was just worried that other people would hear it and that it was disturbing them. You please feel free. I like having the exchange with you, Adam. So please interrupt at any time. I mean, it's kind of our way, I guess. But so to kind of give you guys a little background. So I moved to New York City in 1996. I'm 44. I applied to Tisch School of the Arts for college. I only applied there, got in, and that's at NYU. And I was a New Yorker from then on. Grew up in New Jersey. I also grew up with a house on Fire Island. So I have, actually, it's kind of funny. Lee Zeldin was my congressman there. Um, so I opted out of the, you know, election in 2016, mostly just because I saw New York kind of going cuckoo, and I decided to sort of take a neutral stance and just observe what was happening because I thought it would be important to sort of get a sense of it. I guess I had a bit of a spidey sense that something was going on because my family is from my mother's family. She's Hungarian. My grandfather was Austro-Hungarian, and they fled Hungary to go to Romania in 1944. They escaped the clutches of the green shirts and the Nazis, but in 44, once they're in Romania, they prepared to start to leave there after Yalta because Stalin was moving very quickly on his Gulag system. And my grandfather was nobility, so they were in danger. And they were about to leave to Israel, but the night before that happened, they took them out of the house in the middle of the night. My grandfather was put first in the Black Valley Gulag, and then he was moved to Pitesh prison where he was tortured for 10 years and died. So I'm very familiar with how I've known my whole life that story. So when New York started to change very rapidly, I became very scared, but I never in a million years imagined what would have come next. And what came next was it's amazing. I know that a lot of people have no idea what happened in New York, and I will never forgive our media for that because New York was the center of attention during 9/11, and there was support and sympathy and a gush. And I will say this without apology that 2020 and onward was like we were under attack because we were. The lockdowns began it, and then there was no coverage ever shown of those people who tried to start to say something is wrong. And after George Floyd, and people were bussed into our city to destroy it, and my block was looted. And I heard it because I live just to the west of where the flagships are for all the, and also just west of where Trump Tower is. For those who don't know, because you may never have seen it, it was endless. The it was I think I don't even know how to describe it, and I haven't thought about this part in a long time, but I'll say too that it went on from there. There were people that were distributing what they were calling fireworks, and they weren't, and they were, I don't know if you may have seen on Twitter, people were being kept up all night long all throughout the city for weeks with what was essentially, these were not just illegal fireworks. These were things that they weren't, it sounded like we were being attacked. I mean, there was one night it happened to my building, and I dropped to the floor with my hands over my head, and I thought quite literally I was about to die. And then as it's going on for a long time and my dog isn't reacting, I end up realizing, holy shit, that's what the fireworks were that people are talking about, those goddamn bastards, excuse my language. So fast forward on, and there's many of us protesting the lockdowns and trying to get things,
Do you
back.
ever discuss? Oh, I'm going to come back on for 1 second. Do you ever discuss your own the situation?
I'm getting to that
as
very
it pertains to
quickly.
COVID?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm going to do that
All right.
now. I thought that was the worst of it. And then when June came along of 2021 and the vaccinations were starting to come, I have a condition called complex radial pain syndrome. It used to be known as RSD. The colloquial name that's their sinister is suicide disease because it is the most. When I have the symptoms, it's more painful than cancer or amputation or anything. It's a nerve condition I got from a surgery on my ulnar nerve, and I went to go see my pain management doctor, who's the head of the department at Mount Sinai, and he had been running, by the way, not turning them on, but he was keeping people as best he could alive on the ventilators because he's also a anesthesiologist. So he knew very well what was going on, and he sat me down and he told me, and he was actually crying. He said, "You can't get the vaccine, Juana." And I asked him, "Why are you crying?" He's Romanian, and he was telling me that they were going to make me wear a mask and they were going to do all these. And I said, "Come on, you know my mother, you know me. They can't do that to me." And he wrote me a letter, and that letter I carried with me everywhere I went. And after the mandates went into effect, that letter worked nowhere. literally nowhere. I was immediately made worse than I don't even know how to explain to anyone what it's like to go from being able to go from someone who went to school of the arts and loved the theater and loved the arts and loved everything about New York to suddenly being someone that was not allowed to even go to our New York City homecoming dance thing in the park because I was not vaccinated. And fast forward from there, I did not think I would ever leave New York. I was invited to Florida and for a break in December. And when I came here and I was treated like a human being again, I told my mother that it felt like I was going back to Bucharest when I went back. And then when Hochul basically made it clear that it was quite possible that she would, when I told my mother and showed her Bill A416, which was a bill that basically stated that they could take somebody like me out of my house and put me in a camp, my mother and I realized, I think it was Eric Weinstein who said, sometimes you don't wait for the bread to rise. So I moved to Florida in April and I have not been back since.
Can you now when Eric Weinstein? Is that the council person or that's like there was a politician. There was another instance that I recall, and you reached out to me because I do have obviously political.
Oh,
connections
the
in New
elder
York City.
parole issue.
Yeah. Now this it's just such an interesting thing. Do you mind
Yeah,
sharing
I
this
can
with
talk
me
about that.
the error?
So my best friend was murdered in 2014. He was brutally beaten and I would say tortured. Actually, Adam, would you mind reading it again? Because the echoes actually, and I'm sorry, this is something very hard for me to talk about, so I don't want to embarrass myself. So he was brutally murdered in 2014, and and it's not hard. Doesn't mean that I don't want to talk about it. It's important for people to know this because there's so much going on in New York that people aren't aware of, and it is unforgivable. And no one really asked, so thank you, Adam. Um, and so he was brutally murdered then, and the two men who had tried, it was basically a burglary gone bad. I made sure I briefly worked in criminal defense, so I made sure that I was at the arraignment and all that. And then once I knew that there was no way they were going to be, and I'm certain we knew that it was them without a doubt. They were convicted of second degree murder because in New York, first degree um, is a bit tricky, but that's the only way you can actually get life without parole. So they got second, so they got 25 to life. It was two brothers who did it. The older brother had a record and he had no remorse. In fact, he claimed he was innocent as he was being charged or convicted. Yeah. Fast forward, and this is prior to COVID, but this actually is important to understand because this is part of what led to where we are now. Um, all that abolition stuff, which it has nothing really to do with criminal reform whatsoever. And bail reform doesn't either. It doesn't help anybody. And when they put in bail reform, which basically meant that it was up to the legislature what could or could not be given bail, which meant that at one point, for example, somebody who would, hit somebody 6 times, different people over the course of days, or even choke someone, there was no decision made by a judge, no judge opinion that could hold someone for bail on certain charges, even if the person did it over and over. That's why in New York, for example, someone can hit somebody over the head with a hammer at the same location over and over again for like a month and not be held on bail. And this is some of it's changed, but the same people who put through and I honestly don't know, Adam, if it's actually passed or not. I in large part when I left New York, it hadn't been passed. I used to check all the time. But I'm very glad this hasn't passed because I don't think
But can you discuss like
the elder
exactly what it
parole.
was
Yeah.
and how it affected those people who had committed the crime?
Yes, I will explain it. elder parole was a bill that was proposed, and it was in the legislature, and it was actually in assembly. And further on, I don't know where it is now. It was, I forget the guy's name. Do you remember the name of the guy who put it in? Do you remember the name?
I don't.
If it just to give you some memory, you said that he was,
Well, just skipping that point.
Okay, no problem. It basically stated that anyone over the age of 55 who has spent 15 years in prison would be eligible for parole no matter what their crime. Period. The men who did that to Charles, they're now both already eligible according to their age. They're just a few years away from being eligible because it was 2014 when they went away. That would have meant that my friend Charles, who never got to be 55, and whatever justice that you see, people think that there's such a thing as a sense of justice from there is not, murder is beyond anything you can even I can't even explain it. I hope no one here ever becomes a member of this club, but I'll tell you that knowing that my state would take away from me and all who loved him, but I'm going to be selfish about it, from me, knowing that they had said that his life had a value and that somehow even the option to know that you can get parole, that hope that these guys would get, that in and of itself is so cruel to me and unthinkable. And then, of course, when you mix that with what later happened to the rest of us, including me in New York, it shows you a real picture of what these people think of human beings in life. They don't think much of it at all. And frankly, what you said earlier about conservatives and the I will say this without apology, that I blame the GOP as much as I blame the DNC for what happened in New York. And I think it's a really important thing to do that because they didn't do anything. They had opportunity after opportunity. And what I would only hear is the statement that New Yorkers are knee-jerk Democrats. When things get really bad, they vote Republican. Well, holy crap. So the money and the energy and the time, you're just going to put in whomever it is, and whoever that is we're just knee-jerk and a vote for them. That's disgusting. These are people. We're people. We're not. New Yorkers are not something that can be, sacrificed at the altar of partisanship so that a party can win. We need good leadership. New York City was the first capital.
I'm going to just interrupt.
We are treated with such contempt and belittleness, and it's unthinkable to me. So, about whether it's the whole thing, the thing with Trump that I find fascinating is that the notion to me that anyone would say, for example, that they cannot vote for somebody that they didn't turn away and say to, with Lee Zeldin, for example, they're both New Yorkers and they work together a lot, especially with MS-13 issues in Long Island. And I remember this. To say that because he doesn't denounce him, that
I completely
or something.
There were a couple of other requests, and I'm not good at handling this app. For being able to scroll through, particularly as I'm on my.
If you need some help, you can have me as a co-host, and I'll help you
out. I invited Tracy to speak, and I bought her book too, which is excellent, The Future of You. So Tracy Follows, I did invite you to speak. I'm going to invite you to speak again. And I see Avaton's here, and I think about, I listened to a Spaces that Avaton's participated in about 5 months ago. And I think he had commented, or within that group they commented, that the left is really persistent throughout South America in also doing gun snatches, just taking away people's ability to carry guns. And I think about that, so I'm so happy that Avatar's joined. And one of the other things I've noticed, just scrolling through some of the names here, is how many people have gone blue check, and I think that's awesome. And hopefully they'll continue that beyond its experimental phase, which is where I guess all of us are. I haven't gone blue check yet. I will, but I'm delighted to see that so many people have done that, and I think a lot of that is probably. And I saw the list. I saw the person again. I saw people again who made the request, and I think I'm not clicking on it quickly enough. And then when I scroll down, it gets lost in all the other people that are there. So if you can do that again,
I can. Oh,
it's all right. It's all right. But so I saw the request. So if you want to do the request again, I can press it really, really quickly. I certainly appreciate it. I think a lot of the reason that people have gone blue check is that they want to support the startup. They want to support the startup, and they want to show their kind of confidence in what Elon's trying to do. So I think that's awesome, and I look forward to doing it myself. I can't because my phone is India right now, even though I'm back in the United States and I haven't switched over to my other phone. So you can't. I can't really do that yet. It gives me some type of a restriction, I guess, or constraint on doing it, as well as I need to do it on my Apple. Right now I'm on an Android as well. But I'm so glad that people are going blue check, and I want to thank everyone for joining. I see Philly Girl 74 is here, and I've listened. I follow her daughter on YouTube, and I listened to her daughter initially, who wrote a song and performed a song about kind of America. It's an excellent song, so hopefully you'll tweet that out again so I can share it. And I see that Tralfamador Jorge is here. So thank you so much for joining. And I know that I believe, as I recall, you're now. Well, I shouldn't share kind of the approximate location, but hopefully that part of the country is treating you really well. And I see Kumar is here also. And I recall speaking with Kumar right when Trump had become president. And I said, please don't engage yourself in all the protests and all the rallies, because it's going to exhaust you emotionally. And you can't make money, you can't build a business, because that takes so much extraordinary kind of mental output and imagination and emotional reserves. And you can't exhaust that. You can't deplete that on participation in Me Too, even if you're in agreement on it in principle, because it's a diversion. And I anticipated the layoffs, and that 2009, I was tweeting about it, that there's going to be layoffs, and that these same kids are following the script of NAFTA, which was, Al Gore and Bill Clinton got everybody kind of emotionally charged to join NAFTA, and then finally the United Auto Workers became its biggest spokespeople in favor of it. And once those workers were enlisted to rally on its behalf, they started getting fired. About 3 years later, when kind of the visibility of it had been reduced enough that they could be laid off without a lot of media follow-up of what happened with NAFTA. And so I knew the tech kids were going to do that also. And I also said that, I remember telling Kumar that, a good 50% of the people that he knows at that time, 2017, that are rich, at least salary rich, equity poor, are going to be broke in San Francisco. And sure enough, they are becoming broke, and whether it be through Bitcoin or through some other type of financial medium, they certainly are becoming broke, and that's not, they've exhausted themselves. They're going to become very young relics. And then the newer generation of crazy 15-year-old kids that are growing up now are going to kind of dislocate them from the protest scene, and they're going to be treated the same way as 50-year-olds are now treated. So I know that Kumar thankfully heeded as much of that as he could, and relocated himself to Florida and Texas. And not only did he do that, but he bought Facebook and Tesla cheap. And he sold Facebook, if I recall, his print on the sell side was around $320. And I sold 100 points lower, 80 points lower. So my or at least to Facebook, that is, and took the sell side prints there. So I'm glad to see that Kumar has joined, and hopefully he'll go blue check also, because what the heck, right? So I see the request. So I just pressed on it. So let me see if I made it in time. Request to speak. Yes, I'm going to. Let me see if I can do this now. So I see that H. Oh, I know H. Okay, so, and it's going to be a delight to hear your voice. So I'm pressing H now, and I'm pressing approve. So you've got to turn and then Kumar, I see you, and so I'm excited. Oh, my cat's trying to get out. Trying to get onto the deck. Okay, you got to get off. Get off. So I see H is here. So thank you so much for joining us. I think you might have to turn your mic off, your mic on, and then Kumar, you're next. I'm going to be excited to hear your voice. It's been a while that we spoke, and I didn't follow up with you, DM. H, you're live.
Hi, Adam. I just wanted to say thank you so much for. Is there an echo here?
Let me turn off my microphone. So hold on. My mic is off. It's all you.
I just wanted to say thank you a lot to Mr. Townsend for hosting some investment advice sessions with experts in the space during the rebound out of March 2020 COVID for a lot of us young investors. That was a light speed, just and a super experienced investor teaching us young folks at the cost of $0 to learn how to invest. And it was a turning point in my life, because I learned how to pay attention and to respect the wisdom of those, in this space. And it changed my life. So thank you, Adam. And thank you, Kumar.
And you got a print off of DVN, right?
Pardon me?
Did you get prints? Did you buy DVN?
Yeah, I still remember, because I took your show notes. I did your show notes, and I listened very closely to Shy Girl, to Tracy Schuchart, and she recommended DVN. She recommended VLO. She recommended a lot of energy plays, and energy has totally outperformed. So thank you, Adam.
Yeah, and I remember I called that kind of to go where the puck was. And I first did Valina to give a conceptual overview, because Valina's obviously been incredible. We all know that, right? Hopefully everyone follows Valina, because Valina's been incredible. So the first guest was Valina, and she talked about the bifurcation of the world before anybody else was, right? She was talking about it years ago, but then she talked about it on the first one, which was June of 2020, I think, and about how the world was now just going to become America and China, right? And I was insistent that America and China won the world, and now they're just divvying up the spoils, and clearly that's what's going on. America's just taking the larger chunk, and China's getting kind of the weaker members that are more GDP shock vulnerable, and America's obviously taken over Europe and vassalizing it. And so the next one was with Valina, because I was new to kind of energy also, but I saw that there was a big rotation going on in the economy, and all of us, particularly as older people, are people of pattern recognition, right? And I would think one of the interesting things about Scott Adams, and I've told him this offline as well, is that he's very good at kind of disrupting pattern recognition. Probably whether you agree with him or not, on particular issues is a different conversation. I'm talking about that he is good at kind of doing forensics on ideas, and I'm interested in forensics on investing. So I'm a pattern recognition person, that I saw that the cartels were taking over, and that energy was going to be the energy was obviously part of it, right? That's the heart of it. Whoever controls energy obviously controls food and everything else. So second one was first one was with Valina, who's incredible. And the second one was with Tracy Schuchart. And yeah, she just blew my mind with kind of the DVN and her own thoughts. And I think that was really the first live type of thing she really participated in. Now she's doing it more. She was very hesitant at first to do it, but I thought energy was extremely important because of the sector rotation and what happens next. And I was just as baffled and wondrous as everybody else was, because we all know the household names, but clearly there was going to be a move away. And
I can't hear you, Adam. I don't know if anybody else can. You muted.
I can hear him. He's coming in through
Oh,
fine.
it's weird.
okay. So and I can hear you. So that's good.
Actually, I say goodbye very quick. Thank you, because I have to run to meet somebody for.
Hold on, I gotta shut this phone off. Okay.
But I want to say thank you so much for asking me that question, Adam, and thank you so much
Yeah.
for giving me the chance, because I didn't realize how much I even needed to hear the question.
Oh no, and I appreciate that. Let me just continue for just one moment, and thank you so much.
And I
For,
mean,
was it,
oh,
do I say Wana?
thank you.
Is Wana? Is that
Yeah.
correct? Wana?
Yes.
Okay. So the second investor series was in July, I think, with Tracy. Parsley Energy did really, really good. I think that was a doubler immediately. And she expected the acquisition, and the acquisition happened, I think, 3 months later, and for a double. And then, yeah, Valero, and Devon, which has been incredible. I mean, it's been an eightfold. And I think all of us who own it always think about selling it, but then we're like, why, right? Why am I interested to sell it? So then the next one was about nuclear with Mark Schneider.
Yeah, and he recommended SMR, and SMR recently doubled based off their small modular reactor news that was approved for a prototype by the DOE. So again, congrats.
So then the fourth one was with Anthony Pompliano, and Bitcoin at that point was between $8,000 and $9,000, and you know, I think people should really appreciate all the effort. That it's incredible how much effort and the work ethic of Anthony Pompliano, because not only did Bitcoin go to 60 and hopefully people sold it or whatever, you know, it's still doubled from where it is. I don't know in Bitcoin now. Nevertheless, he printed a lot of millionaires. He changed a lot of people's lives. The next one was with Simon about gold. Next one was with Jim O'Shaughnessy about how to invest, philosophically how to invest, because that's what he is, right? He's a philosopher. The next one was with Leyland Miller about China, and I think we hit the ball out of the park. We talked about Huawei. We talked about kind of the internals, and we talked about chips. And I think Kumar asked a question about semiconductors during that. And we talked about TikTok, and we talked about a lot of things, and prescient again. The next two are about India. Then I did one with Oklo Energy, nuclear, with Peter Thiel's company. I did one with one of my mentors, Barry Sloan from Newtek, which was the last one that I did. And I did one with Milton Deniers when, everyone's got to love Milton, right? When Bitcoin went to 20,000, and it was an explanation of the volume of it, why, the dynamics of it, and also kind of philosophically. And then it very quickly went to 60. It was breaking out for whatever the dynamics were of it. But the thing with Bitcoin is it's asymmetrical information, and most of us are on the poorer side of that asymmetrical information. So I think Milton was extremely helpful, and I did get a trade out of it. I think I disclosed that during the thing, from 20 to 40. And we did another one with Leyland, and we did another one with Tracy, because I became so persuaded about energy, and I think Devon at that time was around $40. No, it was around $30. It was about $40. So it had already quadrupled. It hadn't had its big run up, it had its big run up, but obviously it even doubled from there. I think the investor series was great, but the whole point of the investor series was people can't expend their emotional energy on the stupid elections, because if you don't have money, it doesn't make a difference who you vote for. You're going to be poor. It's just a question of how poor will you be. So I'm so appreciative. I recall the notes that you took under your former self, and I really appreciate it. I remember you did that for several of the periscopes, including with Ron Coleman and others, very much appreciate it. I very much appreciated you kind of doing that narrative, kind of a chronicle of those conversations. So I certainly appreciate that, and I also appreciate the DMs and everything else and the emails we've exchanged, because I know that you've had your own tumults, and so I hope those have worked themselves out in your favor.
Well, I just want to say thank you again, because it's true. When you talk about skating to where the puck is going, and the times that are changing so fast, you have to disconnect yourself emotionally from the political atmosphere. Otherwise, you're going to be too exhausted to understand what is going on and able to adapt to it. And I see it in the people around me. For example, there are some evangelical Christians around me, and they are so emotionally exhausted that their default mode of interacting with their adversity is basically, it's all going to end soon. And so why should I care? Which is basically complete disconnection and depression.
They've done a good job. The politicians have done a good job of deactivating and demobilizing people. They've done a great job. They really have. Actually, Noam Chomsky, who I detest, and Chris Hedges, who if the opposite of detest, I really think he's done it. People can disagree with certain elements of it, but the guy has definitely lived the life where he's had the experiences where he can kind of make really interesting observations, because he's been in those type of war environments and he's seen how propaganda works. But they said very early that social media, they were the first one to turn me on to seeing that social media was now no longer a democratic vehicle, that it was exactly the opposite. They saw very, very quickly that it was now being used to deactivate and demobilize people.
Well, I'll just say 30 more seconds. I just want to say you're the most gracious, big profile on Twitter. You're the number one follow that I recommend, because it's very clear that you're humble and you're also giving your time for free to a lot of people to help people. And I just want to say thank you for that.
And I appreciate that. So thank you very much. It's very thoughtful of you to do that. I appreciate it very much. It's difficult to thank myself sometimes, and I suppose I should. I see. So thank you very much, Kumar. Kumar's here.
Hey, what's going on? How are you?
How are you? Where are you right now, man?
I'm in Miami.
Nice. Nancy just left Tampa just a day or two ago with a nice suntan.
Yeah, I got to meet with her in Aventura a while ago. I want to say 3 to 6 months ago. But we had some conversation about industrials.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm going to mute myself. Did you say you met with Tracy? Now I'm going to mute myself.
Yes, Tracy. Yes, I said Tracy. I met with Tracy 3 to 6 months ago. I've kind of lost sense of time in the last 2.5 years.
Can you discuss your own kind of what's happened to you over the last 5 years? Because you've definitely been busy, and you have not been a political person, even though you're kind of leaning towards the right, like I guess the rest of America is. You've done a very good job of emotionally distancing yourself from the day to day, man. So congratulations. Can you just discuss a little bit about what you've done financially and what you've done with your own business over that time, and why?
So in 2018, I sold my SaaS company. I didn't raise any money for it. It was bootstrapped and scaled, and started in the basement with a buddy in Silicon Valley. And I'd been consulting the whole time while that business was still operating. And I moved to Miami in March 2020. And then from like 2018 to 2020, my business went from having like 3 to 5 people to like 30 to 40 people, which was a big shift for me. I'm not used to having that many people. And I just got tired of California. I would spend weekends in Vegas, not to party or anything. I would go hang out. My buddy had a dog there, so we just chill out because it's less stressful than California. Like on the whole, my stress levels were going down. So then when March 2020 came around and I had to speak at a conference in Miami, I came here to speak at a conference. It was canceled because of COVID. I never left. I just relocated here permanently. And it was a very easy decision to make at the time. It took me less than 30 to 40 days to just move on it. But I think one of the things that you forced me to understand, not forced, but I learned it by sort of osmosis through observing you, is the impact of taxpayer debt on like my daily quality of life. It's not something I ever tied together, and on the tech industry at large. So I really didn't understand what a pension was, that taxpayer dollars go into venture dollars, into private equity. Like those things didn't make sense to me. The other thing I didn't really understand was healthcare. So in 2017, when you talked about healthcare, I think I really just didn't understand that we're the only country on the planet where healthcare insurance companies make money every time you're prescribed a drug or a therapy. That's very different from other countries, right? So I couldn't fathom a lot of those things when we met before 2017, but I think, a lot's changed in the last 5 years in terms of my understanding of some of the institutions and systems and stuff that I didn't get before.
And most importantly, you sold Facebook at the right point.
Yeah, and opportunistically, you always said only, you sell your stocks if you're a long-term buyer when you can upgrade to real estate. So certain opportunities arose, and that worked out nicely. So it wasn't some sort of genius timing. The other thing that had happened is someone else who's older than me and has seen market ups and downs, because like I hadn't been through a cycle. I haven't been through any cycles, right? Like I just started investing 3.5 years ago. I got lucky, got out, played some real estate games, and I'm okay now, thank goodness.
So I'm going to mute everybody so I can talk for a little bit so there's not an echo. So can everybody hear me? Hopefully everybody can hear. So hopefully there won't be an echo. You did very good because, as you discussed, the idea of the stock market is not only that it's volatile, because we want to play that to our advantage. So we want the volatility, and we want to capture the volatility. We want to get paid on the yield, obviously, on that curve, right? But it's very difficult to create generational wealth with the stock market. I mean, you can get rich, but you can also get poor. And Jim Shaughnessy has observed, and a lot of other people have observed who are older, and they've seen it, and I've seen it through many different cycles. It's very easy to get poor. It's extremely easy to get poor, and it's also very easy for the government to capture stock wealth, and they can do it through a couple of different mechanisms. But just like with Bitcoin, they catch you on the exit ramps, right? And it's a very difficult way to have generational wealth, because it's also unpredictable. You don't really know what you're going to be transferring. A basket of stocks, that's okay, but it's difficult to make it generational. You really, even if you kind of you invest $1 million and you make 10 million, or you invest 50,000, and even if you make $1 million from there, you have to buy the tier A asset is real estate. And I think I've been pounding the table on this since I've been on Twitter, 2017 or so, since I've been active on it. But the number one asset class is tier A real estate, right? So that's got to be everybody's objective, to trade up in asset classes. So Bitcoin, I know everybody wants to say it's going to be $1 million, but everything else has outperformed it. Even Boeing has been resilient for those who have traded on it, or even those who endured it. It's been resilient, and I just Bitcoin, those Bitcoin millionaires aren't anymore, and now they're as we all do, they're so kind of tethered to that adrenaline and the thrills of looking at stocks every day, and all the anxiety and the testosterone and kind of that emotional roller coaster is so addictive, that they can't even really comprehend kind of an effortless investment. So tier A rental income, and even in New York, the building right next to where Nancy and I are just sold for $5 million. The thing was selling for $800,000 just a few years. Wasn't on the market, but its book value, so to speak, was around $800,000. And when we first came to a store, it was probably worth about $300,000. And $5 million is a good return, right? And it also you're not looking at it every single day. But then the person also had a parking lot that accommodated probably about 20 cars, and that's your income is there. And then they also had people who lived in it. So it not only does it have its intrinsic value, but it's it's kind of replenishing, right? So yeah, definitely, and I'm glad you did well with your own, because I know that you went into Texas real estate, so you definitely and I think you bought some kind of property out there. And I see Jared is here. Jared, you got to go blue check. You got to do it. And if I recall correctly, you also bought a property, and you have a son, I think, right? Because I remember seeing pictures of your beautiful son. So you really have to do that. And if you see, even with all kind of the people talking about how real estate's crashed, it's crashed. It's back to where it was in 2021. It's ridiculous that people are saying this. It's back to where it was, in some cases, back to where it was in 2020. And if you're getting your rental income, you're making more from it. There's no scarcity of tenants. Even in depressed markets, there might be a scarcity of good tenants, which is an issue of kind of selection. But those things also are cyclical. So if people found themselves in a market where there's really not a good enough reservoir of good tenants, that's something that also works itself out, because we are seeing kind of a renewal. And hopefully they're in an area that's going to benefit from that kind of infrastructure rebuild, which will have some, significant regional benefits to it. So hopefully they found markets for that, or they found markets that are on the boom cycle of the boom bust. So I'm going to take people off mute now, because I invited some other people here, and I see Tracy left, and I invited Tracy. I guess she chickened out, right? Because I did kind of put her on the spot. And I saw a request, and I'm not good at pressing the button. And I see someplace Nancy is lurking here as well, which is also kind of good. There's really not, I started this off because I wanted to talk about the election, and what I saw happening months ago, which played out pretty much exactly as I thought. And it's really not to come in myself, nor even to make the obvious observation I was right. But it's hopefully that people don't really give a shit, right? I've made all the points about the influences of these technicians, and it's played out with Jordan Peterson, it played out with Daily Wire now, and people see that, and the rhetoric of a good quality candidate while they ran Fetterman. So come on, really, they ran. I think I showed Nancy Fetterman for the first time, and I think she was probably pretty startled at his lack of visual and auditory pleasantries. So the candidate certainly doesn't matter, and whether they were people that supported Trump or didn't support Trump also didn't matter. Hopefully people get them, aren't emotionally exhausting themselves from this type of stuff, because if there's one lesson, I probably only have 5 lessons in life that I can that are helpful. Maybe only 2 lessons or 3 lessons, is that emotional energy is very quickly depleted. Emotional reserves are very quickly depleted and extremely difficult to replenish. So hopefully people didn't get so involved in this red wave, and this when then people say, particularly conservatives say, they see a change in the room or the mood or whatever it is. I've heard that for 30 years of my adult life, and I've spent a fortune on those politicians, and it's the same old, and I think Monique and I were just commenting, I think through a DM or perhaps on Twitter, it's publicly about Yugoslavia. I forgot that Yugoslavia was another lie that they sold us into, and how that kind of, now the Baltics moved into where we are now with Ukraine, and I saw it with Iraq, and those people who remember the lies that we were told about Iraq are the enemy now. They want to silence all the witnesses to the crime, and there's nothing any of us can do to stop it. So you know, we really can't try. We can only try and preserve our own well-being. And as I've said before, if you know what the future is going to be, you have a moral obligation um, to yourself, certainly, not to suffer it. So we know what the future's going to be. We can see right now the caste system of the W-2s versus and the 1099 versus the W-2s, and those who are going to have to kind of hunt their jobs versus those who have kept their jobs in Facebook and Google and Microsoft and some of the other companies. Um, we've seen that the woke are becoming unhirable, right? So all those people expended all that energy, and for a while it was on the cover sheet of their resume that they were activists, and now, as Musk is just a leading indicator, employers don't want to see that. They don't want to be torn down, and they're trying to reduce headline risk as much as they can. And so they want to reduce headline risk, um, and they don't want an employee revolt that might lead to that, or unionization attempts, or any other type of nonsense. So, it's hopefully everybody was able to hear me. I don't know. Nancy just tried calling me. Um, if people can't hear me, let me know. Just shake your hand or whatever it is to grab my attention. Or if you get kicked off, as my wife did, sometimes you just have to rejoin. Everyone's giving me the thumbs up, so Nancy, you're on your own. So I would say that, and these are people I like following and I like watching, but, Michael Malice, as I said before, is, and so he said that, and I'm sure he's a nice person and he's certainly very witty, so there's an enjoyment to him. But I'm not interested in thrill and enjoyment. I'm interested in winning, right? And then he talked about this national divorce, which all the conservatives were talking about, and divorce is a division of power, and conservatives have none. So I don't know what they're talking about, a national divorce. And they talked about kind of the Balaji talks about decentralizing, which is the stupidest thing ever. Because if anything, the country has, decentralizing, if anything, the country's been centralized. I mean, the country's been completely federated to the point that the DOJ is now basically overseeing the elections and intruding and intervening in all of the elections, and they made that very clear. I think Florida didn't allow them into the thing, but it's very, very clear what they're doing. They're doing it with the police, they're doing it with the military, and remember the role of the general is to speak of the divinity, right? That's what a general does, and the general's talking about woke, and so you're seeing a complete federalization of the country. You're seeing them really take over. They're doing this through many different mechanisms, mostly financial, through block grants and everything else, where Congress just says, if you're going to get the money, this is the way you have to spend it. They're doing it through immigration, where cities have made it very clear that they can't afford just shouting out as I close this up. I'm so glad that Jacob joined, and thank you so much for sharing pictures of. I think you have two kids, but it's only one kid. I remember seeing that. I see Frank is here, and Justin. Thank you so much for joining, and you got to go blue check also. And Bowtie is here, and Jared. I will at some point become a blue check, but right now, if you take a look at my profile, I am kind of blue check, right? So if anybody has something to say, please raise your hand now or forever don't, right? And I see some, but I can't really get to them in time. So I fed my cats, by the way, while somebody was talking, and I think that's it. So we're still here as speaker. So if you want to join or don't, or if there's anything I've neglected to talk in all my talking myself blue, please say so now or don't. I see Eric has also gone blue check, so that's good. Eric Haber has also gone blue check. That's good to see. I think it really does reflect not necessarily people wanting to. I think it does increase people's visibility. It definitely does, because I definitely see when blue checks are engaging with me in replies. But I think I think a lot of people are also doing it because they want to support Twitter, because we love Twitter, and they want to support Elon Musk because we love Elon, and we want to give him the benefit, and Twitter's a startup, and we want to do our part, and we all want to support the startup. It's like our neighbor. You always want to buy your neighbor's cookies, right? So that's it. And I see Scott's also gone blue check. So that's pretty awesome. I think Scott Sinclair. So I think that's awesome. And again, if you look at my profile, you'll see I'm kind of blue check also. And hopefully everybody's enjoyed that. Everybody's in an optimistic mood. I remind everybody to read the classics. Right now, I'm reading about and I'll close up with this. I'm reading about the Oxford book of Historiography, Volume 1. I'm interested in how to tell history, what history is, the different ways of telling history. And I never thought until recently of history as something spatial, but history is something spatial. And I just think a lot about history, because hopefully everybody is just fascinated by this moment in time, and I guess we're lucky to live in it. So we can kind of see the country transform. It may be kind of sucky, right? But if we can let go of what was and see that we're so far away from it, which is kind of sad, nevertheless, that we can at least for ourselves build something better for ourselves, and hopefully we just read the classics. So that's what I'm reading now, but I'm also reading several books, and I take notes on everything I read. And as Nancy knows, I also keep a list of definitions. So I can't even tell you all the things I'm reading right now. Reading Machiavelli, Founder and Failure, which is his commentary on the Borgias. It's a detail, it's a PDF. I'm a scribe junkie on the Borgias. And it's about a specific element of the Borgias. Spectacular Tumults of Machi and Florent in his book on Florentine histories. I'm reading another PDF which is on the etymology of internal wars. I'm very interested. We're in a civil war in a sense right now, but I'm very interested in how wars resolve themselves. And I thought about this. I got interested in this because Thucydides wrote about kind of the first World War, the first revolution, right, the Peloponnesian War, and he called it the First Revolution, and he wanted to be instructive with it. But one of the things he talks about, I think in book 381 through 84, is about Corcyra and the Corcyran Civil War. So it's a pretty brief segment, but it's so relevant to today. And so I've read a lot about how do civil wars resolve themselves. So how did that Hellenic Civil War resolve themselves, and what happened afterwards? And it's one of the reasons that Socrates was killed, so that people could kind of get distance from what was, which I thought was very interesting. And I saw, although that's just a brief element of the book, it's just interesting how these civil wars resolved themselves and how they created these laws of oblivion that just forgave people for treason or treachery or deception. But then there were also tons of lawsuits. So a lot of the great rhetoricians came out of that because they were all suing each other for lost property and lost wages and all the other things that happened during the Civil War. But they were doing so civilly, and they were all very conscious that they needed to keep their country intact, also for their war self-preservation. So, but then there were also Roman civil wars, right? A series of Roman civil wars prior to Julius Caesar, one of the great humans, prior to Augustus, and then after Nero, there were a lot of Roman civil wars and how they resolved themselves. I'm reading a lot about that right now. Spectacular tumults. And I'm reading a lot about the plebs urbana. A lot about spectacle. I'm very interested in what makes a spectacle because we're enduring a lot of spectacles right now, and certainly the ambitions of those spectacles is something that George Soros talked about in his theory of reflexivity. There's a great lecture that he does on it, a 5-part lecture, where he talks about it in terms of its social implications. And essentially the idea of all these spectacles is to keep people in a perpetual state of disequilibrium, their minds in a state of disequilibrium. And always remember that the brain can only hold in its kind of frontal lobes about 6 thoughts at a time. So the media is very, hold on, I want to take a good whipper right now because I see Rick. The media is demanding that real estate. So the brain can only hold about 6 thoughts at a time. And so the media wants to control entirely what those 6 thoughts are. So that doesn't leave any room in that real estate in your brain for you to have your own thoughts, even about your own family or your own well-being. And they want to keep you in a continuous state of disequilibrium. And as I said, in 2019, spectacles were going to get larger. As I said, in 2020, spectacles were going to get larger. When COVID began and as COVID progressed, spectacles are going to get larger. And with Ukraine, spectacles are going to get larger. And I think that there's a good chance that it's going to be nuclear, because it's going to keep people offset, off balance, and it's going to kind of keep people desperate for this kind of great reset and for this kind of financial. I think it's going to be difficult for there not to be a financial reset because of the strength of the dollar. We need to see some intervention because we're impoverishing 3/4 of the world. So I just don't want to be nuclearized, right? I think it's going to happen in Europe. So I just don't want to be nuclearized myself. But I wanted to have that. So those are the things that I'm reading right now. But I read so much. So again, I was very interested in Civil War. So that's what I've read about recently. I see Rick is here. So Rick, if you have something to say, please do, man.
Yeah, because you'd mentioned some of the books you've been reading. And it was back during COVID. You'd had a really great recommendation. I think it was Kenneth Harrell on the great courses of his the history of the Peloponnesian War. And I wanted to see if you had any other recommendations like that, particularly with the great courses, with the audio side of things.
Yeah. So some of my great favorites of the great courses is actually Machiavelli in context. Kenneth Harrell is great. Everybody should know Kenneth Harrell. I mean, he's great. He also has another one on Alexander the Great. Hopefully, everyone should read the one on should join that course on Alexander the Great. Buy the courses from Audible. They're like $19. You can't go wrong, right? So Kenneth Harrell does Peloponnesian War. He does Alexander the Great, and he also does the warriors on the steppes because it's it's kind of relevant to Ukraine, right? But it's very interesting about the history of the barbarians, so to speak. When you hear about Rome and you hear about the barbarians, you really don't have a good sense of who those barbarians were beyond maybe Alaric and some of the Huns and the Goths. You really don't have a good sense, and you really know nothing about their political organization or their own kind of territorial ambitions and all their own deceptions and the palace intrigues that happened, between them and Rome. And so I also like I forget the name of the professor, but he's incredible. One of my absolute favorites from the great courses is Machiavelli in Context. because most people should not get as scholarly as I do about Machiavelli. And the thing is, when you really get scholarly about it, you realize all the deliberate inconsistencies in Machiavelli and all the ironies that he put in there. And was he really trying to tell the prince how to be good, or was he trying to tell the people how to take down the prince, and just kind of why was he trying to help the Medicis when the Medicis had tortured him for at least 2 weeks, very brutally tortured him, and economically cast him out and his family legacy and lineage, and tried to impoverish him. So why was he trying to help them through his Book of Mirrors? So I think the great courses on Machiavellian context is good enough for most people. It might even be good enough to not have to read discourses on Livy, or the Prince, or the Art of War, or the Florentine histories, because he does a very good job of talking about the political, economic, and social environment and the climate of then, and why it's important as probably our first political scientist. And then from there you can progress. I I've done probably 30 of those courses, and now I've kind of evolved a little bit past them because I'm so interested in these kind of little micro niche. But most people shouldn't be. I don't think most people should be as dogged as I am, because it's really not helpful to know that much about Machiavelli, to know all about the ironies. It's good enough for most people to know kind of the basic quotes, so I think that the course is also fantastic at understanding the basic quotes of Machiavelli and what he meant when he said it and why he said it. I've perhaps unfortunately gone much deeper into understanding that what he really meant with those quotes, and those quotes fully in context. I think most people don't need to do that. I think his course on the Kenneth Harrell's on the Peloponnesian War really does help give a sense of tyrannies turn inwards. And it's something I've shared on Twitter, for many, many years, is that tyrannies do turn inwards. And so that tyranny that we built to oversee Iraq, one of the things that happens in Roman history, right, is Rome, during Tiberius, the last years of Augustus, was deceived into going into the Teutoburg forest and was completely devastated, just completely lost, and they were tricked into going into this ever narrowing forest, and then they were greeted by their foes and completely slain, lost their flags and all these other things that are symbolically very important to them and religious-wise very important to them. Nevertheless, I think people need to study the classics, and I avoid everything contemporary. I bought Matt Walsh's book. I read it for about 2 chapters, and I got sick of it. It's very frustrating because I can't change that much of it, but it's also upsetting, not just because I can't change it, but it's upsetting if you look at it kind of siloed out as this is crazy, and take a look at everything that's going wrong. But if you don't have kind of a global historical timeline that you're operating on, you can become very distressed, and it can cause a lot of upset. But if you take a look at a longer timeline, then you see that this is just a natural course of things, and you just hope that on the other side things kind of resolve themselves, and some of the cruelties kind of die down, and some of the barbarities kind of lessen, so that the barbarities are quick and painful, and their duration is short, so that people can kind of resume themselves. I don't think it's over yet. I think we've got a little bit longer to go, so it's going to get upsetting for people. So hopefully people will just keep the blinders on, read the classics. You don't need anybody's interpretation. Most of these things are written to be very, very easy. I don't even suggest necessarily Plato, even though a little bit of Plato is very helpful. But I don't think you have to be kind of academic about it. I think superficial is good enough. These things are written very elegantly, better than any of their anybody contemporary, and they're also not written as a commercial enterprise. They prided themselves on the use of language and kind of the elegance of it. And books were so scarce then, and the consumers were so kind of high and rich and selective that they had to satisfy those appetites. So hopefully everybody will read the classics. I'm always happy to suggest the things, and I'll actually tell people all the things I'm reading now, and then I guess I'll close it up. So what I'm reading now, just going over my books, is Gilgamesh and Pseudo-Callisthenes. I just read that, which is very interesting. I'm reading the histories of Tacitus, actually the Oxford Explainer of it. Ceremony and Power. It's called Ceremony and Power. It's by Jeffrey Sumi. Again, a PDF I got it from Scribed. And I'm very interested in really the ceremony, of power, of how power celebrates itself. And it's mostly about Rome and Greece and how it's been done historically. Remember, America is a very short-lived country, so you really can't just take a look at it now. It's easier to look at these things, kind of do the forensics and a postmortem on Rome. Cities and Town and the medieval city. I'm reading Thucydides, De Wold, who writes about Thucydides. Discourses on the first decade of Titus Livius, of course, obviously. History of Rome, Book 2. How to Kill a Superhero, which is an article that I turned into a PDF. I'm reading that because I'm interested in narrative structures. Machiavelli, a PDF. It's called Good Arms, Violent Oppression, and the Art of War. Machiavelli, Aesthetic Advice, Visual Arte, and the Political Sublime and the Prince. Machiavelli and Caesar Borgia, a reconsideration of Chapter 7. Chapter 7 is very interesting because Machiavelli talks about Borgia, and he talks about the spectacle and awe of the killing of Ramiro da Orca, which everyone should read about. Machiavelli's Prince, Erica Benner's take on it, a new reading of it. Machiavelli and the Rape of Lucretia. Machiavelli, the Prince's Memoir. Minor Character Narratives in Slaughterhouse 5. It's a PDF. On the etiology of internal wars. A book from Donald Kagan about the outbreak of the Peloponnesian War. What is the conflict that really led to it? And one of the things I think it's very, very relevant now, because people really don't understand the Peloponnesian War, and people talk about bullshit, the trap, and all this other type of nonsense. Thucydides trap, or whatever they call this type of stuff. People should really read it in context. So do that, do the Kenneth Hara one, and then get a little bit more interested in it. So because one of the things that is the reason that Athens lost was because of the strength of the allies of their adversaries, the Spartans. The Spartans were very, very good at their diplomacy, and one of the things we're seeing now is, at least what I observe is, without having any feeling of the intricacies of the war in Ukraine, what do I know about it, right? Is that American diplomacy and the West diplomacy is just atrocious. I mean, it's just so abrasive and it's so snobbish that people are going to say screw you just because of how belligerent it is. So one of the things that happened is Athens just pissed everybody off, and then you get into the Myleene dialogues and everything else. About plebs urbana, something I've tweeted about today, which I'm reading a PDF about. Political communication in the Roman world. Another book I'm reading, Thucydides. Roman rhetoric and Roman political thought from Sallust, Livy, and Tacitus. I tell you, I'm crazy. I read too much. I don't think people should read as much as I do. I don't think it's probably healthy. I don't know. The Origin of Tyranny by Ure. The Oxford History of Historical Writing. The Roman Republican Political Thought. That's just some of it. Folks, that's just some of it. And I'm reading all this. I read 2 books a week. And that's not including really the PDFs. I really crave this stuff because I truly want to understand what's going on. And not only do I want to understand it, but the really difficult part is not being able to kind of have it churn in my head, but is to be able to have those thoughts cross the transom so that I can speak it and another person can perceive it and understand what I want to say and how I want to say it in exactness. Not in its, somebody would just say, oh, everything is fucked up, COVID is fucked up, whatever. but I don't want to use that because I don't think that's helpful. It doesn't really convey that much other than this kind of intensifier. I really want to talk about all the elements of the thing. So I need it to make sense in my head so that it can make sense to somebody else. Because one day I really want to tell this story. The collapse of complex societies, um, which is great, although he's a leftist, whatever. More Kurt Vonnegut. Everybody hopefully should understand how Kurt Vonnegut wrote because there's few people who could write like that guy. He wrote very simple words, but he thought about them so much. So Slaughterhouse Five is unbelievably brilliant. What he was able to convey about anti-war from somebody who lived it, and he was literally inside the bombing in Dresden. Lysias' speech number 12, which is a classic. Everyone should read that. Political Trials and Dictatorship. I'm telling everyone what I'm reading right now. It's down on my queue. Xenophon Apology Memorabilia. And I read all these things. I mean, this is not something I'm saying boastfully. I'm saying almost regretfully that I'm reading all of this. So I talked myself blue, and hopefully people enjoyed that. I know that there were some people who raised their hands, but I'm not good at that type of stuff. You got to press this thing quickly. For me, at least, I have to press it quickly because it flashes. And I see Johnny just gave me like that thumbs up heart type of like type of thing, right? So I want to thank everybody, and if anybody wants to jump in and say something, please do, because I can talk, right? I won't shut up.
One of the things you're really good at is what you were just referring to about being able to speak in a precise way that communicates the idea and communicates that idea in a method that will be received by the listener with the original intent that you built into it. Obviously, you have a bunch of experience in sales, and that's one of the things you have to do in sales is to be able to communicate that way. What were some influences or some? And I know you have that in big series on your website of all of the different sales articles. But what were some of the influences and experiences that made you operate at the level that you're able to in this type of communication?
In terms of communication,
well, I mean, obviously, sales is as you said, sales you're always selling. But I was referring.
Everybody's always selling. But I want to correct you on that. When you say you are always selling, as though you're making me kind of a unique.
My apologies. I meant
you as in that's particular to my character or being.
Oh no, I meant you as in everyone is always selling themselves. I meant it in the. I didn't mean it in you specifically. I meant you referring to everybody in the room. My apologies.
Everybody is always selling themselves. Some people chose to get a blue check, and I think they did that for support of Musk. Ultimately they did that, I think, as a reflection of their kind of appreciation of Musk, and I agree with that. But that's also how they want to perceive themselves in their own identity. So every single thing you do in life, every single movement you make, even if it's as I've talked about, I pet a lot of dogs. I was petting one earlier today, and my approach to the dog is very formulaic, right? As most of ours are. You ask the owner, as you approach the dog, you make eye contact somewhat with the dog to see if the dog is, going to be hostile or receptive to you. Usually they're like beaconing, they're like telegraphing their hopes or their displeasure as you approach. And then you ask the owner, "Can I pet your dog?" The owner say yes, usually. So I'm selling myself to that person because I don't want to appear threatening to them, right? I don't want to appear as menacing or somebody who's trying to be solicitous. And because I'm a guy, if it's a woman, or flirtatious, or if it's another guy, guys always have to, quickly evaluate whether this person's a physical threat to themselves, right? We always do that. So I don't want to appear in any way menacing. Um, guys obviously always signal each other so we can see if there's gonna be a confrontation. Either we nod our head, or we shake our head, or we give ourselves the eyebrow thing. Whatever it is, I don't know how women kind of how they do so in their own kind of brief, quick encounters, so they can make that evaluation. But so I approach the owner, approach the dog, approach the owner. May I pet your dog? They'll say yes. I'll pet the dog because I love petting dogs. But I'm selling myself to the owner, and now I'm also kind of selling myself to the dog, right? Because I want the dog to be, both welcoming to me, and but not just kind of tolerating my pet, but I want to kind of have that connection with it because it's a dog, right? So I'm also selling myself to the dog. Um, and then I'll speak to the owner a little bit, but in my regular patter, and then I'll say thank you for letting me spend time with your dog, and I want them to think well of me as I leave. I know that they're going to be looking at me a little bit and kind of reflecting on that 5 minutes. I try and keep it to about 5 minutes, right? They're going to be reflecting on. I want them to think well of me. So I'm aware of that as part of my identity. Part of my identity is um, I want them to think well of me uh, as I walk away, and I want to think well of myself as I walk away. So part of my identity is that I want them to think well of me as I walk away, and I want to think well of myself as I walk away. So even in that encounter, when I walk into a store, I always try and smile. I'm always a person that is trying to be not overly smile because that's creepy, right? And or again, if it's to a woman, I've got to make sure that it's not the type of smile that is uh, kind of I don't know, creepy, right? Uh, so I've got to be very aware of the smile, of my eyes, of everything else. But that's also kind of a salesmanship. Um, we're always selling ourselves, but we're also selling ourselves, to our own minds, right? Your mind is your consumer. Whatever you tell your mind is, you're selling yourself to your mind, and whatever you tell yourself to your mind is what is reality. Um, you know, so I think uh, you asked about my communication, but you initiated that by talking about the sales thing. So I just wanted, it's not a correction as much as it's just kind of me, you know, taking that and broadening it so that I people understand that sales. Um, I follow somebody called Ment Wilson, whatever his last name is, Ment on who's a very talented artist on Twitter. The reason I follow him is at first he said, I'm a black artist. I'd like people to look at my art. It costs you nothing. Can you just look at it or share it or tweet it? It was very effective. It got thousands of likes and retweets, and hopefully it led to some conversion of sales. But I followed him, and most of the people I follow, a lot of people I follow, I get notifications on because I'm actually interested. Um, and I commented in a Twitter exchange with him recently that he's good at intimacy and engaging across this kind of digital transom, but and he didn't really recognize what I was saying, and artists don't really like to sell their own product because they feel that vulnerability of asking for the order. Because when you're asking for something, you're making yourself vulnerable to no, and particularly when you're an artist and there's so much creative output, and it's so much a part of your being that no is very hurtful. No doesn't bother me. It has bothered me, but I've had to condition myself. But authors are afraid of a no. Artists are afraid of a no, uh, and they shouldn't. People are always selling themselves, and if you can embrace that part that you are selling yourself, um, now the next thing is you're going to say, I want to be well compensated for it. If you can recognize that you're always selling a part of yourself, then the, that just naturally then leads to I want to be well compensated for it. I don't want to sell myself cheap because if I'm selling a fraction of myself, then I'm never going to recover. Right? You're never going to recover whatever effort you put into something. You're never going to recover that time or that muscular output or whatever what required to do it, emotional output or whatever it was. So you now that fraction of yourself you need to make sure you're well compensated for. Um, and particularly most people pride themselves on kind of a discretionary effort. It's what makes people exceptional. So you need to, so part of that recognizing that we're always selling ourselves and that discretionary effort is, pricing it, correctly, pricing it, to the market. Um, so we are always selling ourselves. So when I speak and I try and communicate well and I try to be very thoughtful with my words, it's not. Some part of that is I want what I'm saying to be exactly understood as what I'm saying because I don't want to give people permission to kind of reimagine what I say. People have a tendency to do that. Scott Adams talks about that a lot, right? I don't want people. I don't want to give people permission to reimagine or uh, reimagine my words. Nor do I want somebody to give people permission to kind of abbreviate my thoughts for their own convenience. If I say 10 words, and I've probably selected those 10 words fairly well, so I don't want them to abridge it to 3 words. Right? People have a tendency to postcard everything. And another part of that is, I want, again, I'm selling myself within this conversation somewhat because I want people to think of myself as as articulate, as smart, um, and such. And I want people to think of me like that. It makes me feel good about myself, and it's also how I think of myself. So if I were to think of my own identity, that's how I want my own identity to be. So I think my communication is just part of that. So what made me successful in sales then is in order to be successful in sales, you have to have an urgency, right? You have to desire to you have to take pride in selling. Right? You have to take pride in exceeding goals and exceeding whatever quotas you have, but in exceeding. And you have to take a pride in that consumer saying, you know what, he sold me, he did a good job, he got it done for me. So there's a lot of it. So we're always selling ourselves. I take a lot of pride in it. And hopefully, you know, I think some part of that of selling myself is in my communication and in the choice of words that I use, and even in fact in the when I like when I have pauses and I not stutter, whatever those words for it are, where you just kind of hem and haw, whatever it is. Those are actually deliberately put in also, as I just did it now. It's done for a couple of reasons, right? Now it's just a natural part of me now, but it's done because it actually gives the listener a chance to kind of uh, take in what I'm saying, because I don't want to exhaust that person's mind, that person's patience, and I also want to say things in a way that's a bit visual. So because it's because it's done through voice, I need to kind of be aware of how my voice goes up and down. I do that very deliberately, and I also put pauses in there, like that, so that a person can think about what I'm saying. I don't need to put it there, but I'm putting it there so a person can kind of digest. Their brain can relax. It's kind of like a very brief intermission. I talk a lot, right?
Oh yeah, like the in particular what you were talking about where you're lowering your voice at the end of a sentence, which I just exaggerated there. Yeah, there's a whole like, like Scott Adams just talked about that before. There's a way for doing that particular. I mean, my background in it is more of like the hypnotherapy side of things, where you're trying to intentionally calm someone down and slow down towards the end of the sentence, that kind of thing. But yeah, you're absolutely amazing at it, and like, it's so good I don't even notice that I'm noticing that you're doing that half the time. Particularly with the where you're using pauses to allow people to process. Usually, when you see people intentionally using pauses, they're using it to build tension, as well you're using it to actually allow people to process what you're saying better, as opposed to like the using it again, like I said, to build tension, which is generally done as more of like a theatrical type of thing. But it has multiple uses in a lot of fields.
And remember something, people aren't really listening to you. So you've got to have them listen to you. They're not really listening. Well, they're listening to you, of course, hopefully, right? But they're not really listening uh, with precision, kind of to the words. They're kind of listening directionally, I suppose, to the words you're saying. So um, they're taking in that information in very small clips, and they're taking in kind of the emphasis, the intensifiers. They're taking in kind of your voice tone, your modulation, what excites you, what doesn't excite you. it's a performance. In any type of conversation, there is some type of a performative quality to it, and you need to keep the other person, intellectually engaged, and those little pauses, those little intermissions allow them those little it's like a little clip. It's like almost an interstitial, but instead of there being an interstitial that's an ad, it's an interstitial instead that allows them to kind of reemerge from their listening exhaustion mode, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. And also one of the things you just said about all communication being performative, that is a you particularly see that in politics compared to, like, I'm old enough to remember when you'd have the big gigantic cameras for reporters who would try to like chase down a politician in order to get an interview, and the politician would run. Um, and nowadays, of course, they don't do that because they know that that looks stupid on a video clip, or it makes them look embarrassing. And instead, of course the cameras aren't big and heavy nowadays, but you'll see them. They will immediately know to smile, so they look better on the camera. And I think that's a effect of having learned that you always have to perform nowadays as a public figure.
Well, it's interesting because you can actually even go back to Hillary Clinton, right? And forgetting about all the politics of the thing, one of the things that was very interesting about Hillary Clinton's 2008 run for senator and 2016 run, and again, without the politics, right? Just taking a look at it kind of analytically, um, is she was so battered from the media in 2008 when she was trying to have one-on-ones. They battered her so much that she took a different approach, which is this kind of stadium approach, where she always had this kind of a partition between herself and everybody else, so that there wasn't that opportunity for that kind of battering that she took. I've also learned from that experience. I think hopefully people do learn from that experience as kind of a spectator to the whole thing. Is if you give people in politics, if you the media is always going to be adversarial to you. They're always trying to tear you down. Um, and even just with Biden there, they just don't let them. I mean, they give him very very small appearances, and they don't even let him speak. If you actually take a look at what's happening with Biden, they're only giving you 10 words, and then it's an hour of somebody explaining what he meant by that. The politics has its own art. I'm so fascinated by that also, and I've studied that. I've studied the rhetoric of it, and as again, I was doing the visual arte of Machiavelli. These are things that really interest me, but they also interest me because I'm trying to understand how to tell my story. I've always talked about this being about, you know, this being my Peloponnesian War and me being its Thucydides. One day I really want to tell this story. I knew that, people were like, well, in 2020, uh, why wasn't I talking about it, with COVID? I talked about it, but why wasn't I kind of coming out with some type of a chronicle then and whatever, whatever? And I knew that's because it was going to be another spectacle, and people were just going to move on. And if now I was to come out and talk about 2020, 2020, people really wouldn't be interested because now they're kind of worried about kind of this moment in time, and the past no longer exists. So I studied the performance arts a lot. I read a lot of books on writing that I really like how to tell a story. I'm fascinated by it, and I try and practice it and exercise it on Twitter. Twitter is an extremely good tool for how to practice extremely effective communication. It's so restrictive in its space that it really, for somebody who wants that practice, it's very good because you have to be kind of selective. About each word has to mean exactly what you want it to mean. It can't be sloppy. So I've read some of the books I've read that have helped me out with that in terms of its communication and its visual style. Is oh god, it's uh oh my gosh, I can't remember some of them, but there's some really good books that explain how movies tell their stories. Um, and I think some part of that comes across also in my salesmanship. I'm probably better at it now than I was younger. I think when I was younger, I was a lot more annoying to people. They just wanted me to sell them something and get out of their office. I think now I try and, although I've always been entertaining, I think now I'm much more aware of want of trying to get them to want me to stay in the office a little bit longer. Although now I've got nothing to sell, which I kind of like. But I wish I could. I just can't find. But I've read a lot of books. Even now I'm looking. I've read probably about 5 books on even comic books and superhero psychology. Superheroes, Capes Carol, Super God by Grant Morrison. I'm interested in how to tell a story. I want to be able to tell a history that's written, but so that people can really experience it as a visual. And I think pauses are very helpful for that because pauses allow people to imagine something as a visual. They allow kind of this conversion of like of the spoken word, which it can be kind of flat, and and people kind of have a low pain tolerance, particularly these days for this for too long, too many spoken words, but turn it into something visual. So I really try and do that using a lot of metaphors. I try and also be very creative in my metaphors, um, and try and imagine a lot of new metaphors because metaphors, when used correctly, do have that visual. Somebody has to imagine what I mean by it. So even today, I was talking about if how Ben Shapiro was talking about how they need to come out with better candidates, whatever the words, quality candidates. Um, I think I call that. Let me find the language right. I think I said that anybody who says it's the quality of the candidate is Jordan Peterson. Anybody who says it's the quality of the candidate, in quotes, is Jordan Peterson you. Um, and then don't engage in that unproductive, chit chat. And today I said you were being daily wired, and there's a visual element to that, right? And now I pause now so that you can contemplate and you can put a visual, you can make that something that's real that you can hold on to. I think that's going to be very important, to tell this story, this history. And I think most people are really not going to be particularly too interested in the history. So I'm writing it for a very specific audience. And the way I'm writing it is very kind of broken up into very, very small pieces because the only way that somebody can get this entire system view, this kind of autopsy, is to look at each of kind of those little pieces of the body. And that takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of extraordinary effort. And I want to make that as visual as possible so people can benefit from all of this effort that I put in. People don't need to suffer through it, and they can just kind of enjoy kind of 8 hours of reading or 8 different documentaries, 30 minutes each, or however I turn it into.
Yeah, is that like the daily wiring that I think Scott Adams called stuff like that like a linguistic kill shot. Um, I don't know, maybe it was one of the books you were thinking of, Impossible to Ignore by I think Carly Simon, if I remember correctly. I know that's a really good one. Particularly.
Carly Simon, the singer.
No, I'm remembering. I'm getting her name confused. It's something Simon that starts with a C, and that was the name that popped in my head. Uh, hold on. Possible. Carmen Simon. That was the name. Um, Maybe it's not. That was a. I read that book and it was extremely useful for making sales presentations within the engineering world. Um, I did want to ask, one of the things you mentioned was with regards to sales. I know from the sales series you have on your site about avoiding, you're not wanting the person you're selling to necessarily to want to see you as a friend or even to like you within that way. It's more about that they respect you. And as you mentioned how nowadays people are wanting you to stay in the room, is that a reference to the going more of like the friend route, or is that in reference to something else?
Well, you gotta in sales. You have to have there has to be some friction and antagonism between you and the person you're trying to sell to, right? There has to be some. There has to be almost a deliberate amount of kind of pushing the envelope because naturally they want to say no, even if they philosophically agreed. They want to be able to assert themselves within it. They, it could be their own pride of vendor management. Perhaps part of their identity, of their own identity, is kind of vendor management, uh, and not letting the salesperson get the best of them or whatever it is. So, they're, but at the same time, people want to be sold to. People really do. But you need to make it as effortless as you can. And if you want to make it easy and effortless for them, there has to be some aggression on your part. However, it can be kind of a friendly antagonism, but it's got to be very mechanized. The sale has to be very mechanized, that they have to adhere to kind of your script, and they're always going to try and push you off the assembly line, and you got to keep on putting them back on the assembly line. And that takes a considerable amount of antagonism. It's just how that antagonism presents itself doesn't necessarily need to be nasty. It just does need to be assertive. You need to be conscious of it. So you can't be their friend, because if you're their friend, then it just makes it easy for them to decouple the assembly line and to jump off of the assembly line, and it gives them an opportunity to say no, even if they don't want to say no, but it's their way of reestablishing control in the relationship. So you can never be their friend. You don't even want to be their friend. The friendship happens after the sale. That doesn't mean you're not shaking their hand. It doesn't mean you're not smiling. And there's not a considerable amount of pleasantries, and you're asking about their kids and all this. That's certainly okay. It's not optimal, but it's certainly okay. But you don't want to be their friend. Most people confuse sales with with a friendship. With um, they're so uncomfortable with that old vulnerability of hearing no and how it affects their own perception of themselves and their identity and conceive of themselves, that they want to smooth it by making that person a friend, and then making it easier for them to say no, and then making it easier for you to accept their no, all in good faith. And I think that's a very bad habit of people. Um, people have to people have to sell themselves. Um, so if that's helpful, but people should never you should never allow that friendship. I'd rather not be a friend, and that urgency that a good salesperson has to turn everything into an assembly line, because that's the only way that urgency can be really helpful and assisting, is if you turn everything into assembly line. So even your first conversation, even before you speak with them, you're putting that person on an assembly line. If they're not interested, you have to find out why they're not interested in. Is it philosophical? Is it that they're using another vendor? If they're using another vendor, why they choose that vendor? And um, there's a whole kind of questionnaire, and it can't be a scripted questionnaire, because then it'll lose its fluidity, and it's got to be fluid, because you've also got to listen to it's very important that you listen to what the other person says in a sale, because people will actually kind of sell themselves, and you have to make sure that you're not giving them an opportunity. You have people will sell themselves to themselves. They'll sell the product kind of to themselves, and you've got to make sure you don't kind of interfere with that. So it's very important that you listen to precisely what they're saying. So I don't know. I love it. Sales can make a poor kid rich. So I think sales is great. I'm going to take this from Timothy. So Timothy, you've been patient, and thank you so much. So Timothy, I just added you. If you're there, you're going to have to go off mute. Timothy, are you there? Timothy, I just added you. So if you're there, okay. Well, Timothy, you're there someplace. So if you might have to unmute your phone. But that's it. So I talk a lot. I haven't done a Spaces in a while. Nevertheless, I haven't done a Periscope in a long time, and I'm not going to do it until there's some type of certainty with what Musk wants to do with it, because they certainly throttle the bandwidth of it. And there's really not that much to say. I mean, I did the Investor Series, which obviously was good. I did all the Darren Beatties back when, Darren was just kind of emerging as, just a remarkable person and presence and his own contributions. And it was even before Revolver had started. I did Paul Gottfried, right? Paul Gottfried is incredible. I've read all Paul Gottfried's books. His books are ridiculously good. They're so good. I did Lee Smith, right, on the coup, coup against the president. I thought that was great. I did Julie Kelly about January 6th. I also did Darren Beattie about January 6th. January 6th is one of the most interesting stories to me. It's just incredible because it's kind of like a chessboard, right? In a game of chess where I play a lot of Scrabble, there's a clock, and the game lasts, each side is 25 minutes in Scrabble. And after a game of Scrabble is completed or a game of chess, competitive players, you're going to do forensics, right? You're going to do kind of a post-mortem on the game, and you can see all the different alternatives and the probabilities and possibilities and what could have happened had this happened and this happened, and look at different iterations and how it would have played out. And that January 6th is this kind of chess board that you can kind of observe almost in real time, as to do a lot of analysis on what's happening, the propaganda of it, kind of the legal distortion, this kind of asymmetrical kind of combat, the spectacle of it, which I'm fascinated by. For me as a Tom Cruise ridiculous fan, for many people, the January 6th hearings were their Top Gun 2. It truly was. They got that same thrill, that same excitement as I had sitting in the theater. Most people had sitting in the theater, and that kind of joy of life. A lot of people had that same experience listening to the hearings. And as people know, I like Ali Alexander. I certainly supported at a distance as much as I could, Stop the Steal. And what he was doing there. So I talked myself blue, and again I just included some people. And Timothy, you're here. If I think you're mute. But so that's it. If I've missed anybody, thank you everybody for listening to me. I just babbled. I expected this only to last half an hour until I fed my cats, and it lasted much longer. I see Nancy is still here, so thank you very much, Nancy. Frank, Justin, thank you very much. I see Darsh is here, so again, thank you. I just appreciate everybody spend time. Matthew's here. I was actually just thinking about you because I saw some horticulture recently, and I wonder if that was your work in progress. And Scarlett, thank you so much. So I talked myself blue, and I'm just appreciative that people obliged me. I was very thoughtful of everybody to listen to me ramble on, and it was helpful for me also. So thank you everybody. Thank you for joining. I actually recorded this, so 50-50 I'm going to unrecord it. I don't know. I'm going to press 2 buttons and then everything ends. So the first button, and then it says, are you sure? And I am. So I'm going to press the button and then everything stops, right? So I press the first button, you see? And do you want to end the space and stop recording? Now I could keep talking, people, but I'm gonna say yes. I'm gonna say end. So that's it. Thank you so much. I am going to eat dinner, and then that's it. Maybe watch a Survivor blog podcast or something. That's it. Thank you, everybody. And I'm pressing the button.